Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. At this time, I will reconvene the La Quinta City Council meeting of March 18, 2014. At this time, I'd like to ask you all to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Place your hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda is public comment. Anybody wishing to speak on an item which is on the agenda, I'd ask that you please fill out a request to speak form. It's a form like this. It's in the back of the room, and give it to our city clerk over here. At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. And I do have some requests to do this, so if you would come up, give us your name and address for the record, and we'd appreciate it if you could keep it within 3 minutes. First one is Patty Lazar.
Good afternoon. Susan, do I give you these copies that I want each person to have?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mayor Adolph and the council members. Today I'm presenting a packet of documentation showing the grading of Horseshoe Street, which is what I'm here concerned about, the flooding. And it's adjacent to hole number 11 of Indian Springs Golf Course. And this packet will show you pictures before and after the curb gutter improvement of 2000 and before the golf course made changes. Also in that packet, you'll see photos of the water heights and the resulting damage, both to real and personal property from floods from 2008 and as current as 2013. In that packet, there's a petition from 2008 that shows 48 signatures from neighbors in the neighborhood regarding the water issue on Horseshoe. In February this year, I can't recall if it was the 27th or the 28th, but we were preparing for what was going to be a pretty significant rainstorm. You'll see a picture, it's the very last one, that shows what I have to do every time it's going to be a rain. And I put down heavy plastic in the driveway. I put 12 50-pound bags of sand, and then I rewrap the heavy plastic on top. Now that's if I'm home and if I'm alerted that it's coming. It's coming, yeah. The same day, in that photo, you'll see a City of La Quinta truck. They were there cleaning out this drain that is supposed to catch the water. Well, all he did was remove the debris from that grate. He put it on the side of the concrete cut and left. If we'd had significant rain that night, that debris would have just gone back in the drain, filled it up, and the water would not have flown. So that remedy for that drain is pretty inadequate. If my husband and I were to sell our home today, we obviously would have to disclose the flooding issues. With it not being resolved, our home has dramatically lost value. My husband and I feel that both the city and the golf course are responsible for this flooding, especially what we recently suffered in August. Currently, we have about $18,000 in damage. and we are seeking the city for remuneration. The city knew of the flooding as far back as 2008 with that petition, and the draining started to be resolved, but is still inadequate, grossly inadequate. The golf course made changes, and from that first picture on the first photo, you could see it used to be flat and the water drained right onto the golf course. This course bermed up, and now the water runs down into our driveway, into the garage, into the courtyard, into the house, and the most severe was in August. This berm needs to be removed immediately. Apparently, there was a plan the golf course presented, and in 2000, they did not adhere to the plan that the city apparently approved. So how is it that they are still existing with this berm and the rest of us are suffering? August 25th, there were other properties in La Quinta that did suffer. I'm not the only one. I did find out that La Quinta's Resorts and Spa also had damage, and that Public Works is working with them with their street drainage issues. My neighbors and I deserve the same attention. That's all I'm asking for, because I'm not always there to prepare, and if so, it still isn't enough. So I thank you for your time today. Thank you for looking at those pictures, and try and place yourself in my shoes if it was your home and you weren't able to control the water. Thank you.
Patty, thank you, and rest assured, we're going to get this problem resolved. And that I talked to our Public Works Director last week, and I said, where do we stand on this thing? And he says, we're moving forward, and we'll get this thing resolved quickly.
Okay. And my apologies, I forgot to state my name and address at the beginning.
Well, I think we have it from 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you very much. And when you say quickly, do we look at a year? Do we look at?
No. No.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Patty. Sandra Rogers.
Hello, Mayor Adolph. I have some pictures here for everybody. So should I give them to her?
Okay, yes, give it to our city clerk.
We bought a home.
And you can give us your name and address.
Sandra Rogers, 79880 Horseshoe Road in La Quinta. We're down the street a little bit where it goes up. As you come on our street, it goes down where the dip is and up. And we bought a home out here in 2009, and we just moved out here from the beach full-time this last year. See if I can make it through the summer. Anyway, but I walk my dogs. I did animal rescue for years in San Diego and was on television and everything. And I have 3 dogs, and I walk them a lot. And right next to their home is there's dirt, and there's the picture of the drain. And I was noticing that there were these big plants. There's pictures of 2 dead plants and 1 live one. And the 1 live one is what the big dead plant looked like. And I was going to go take a picture the next week, and then we had that flash flood. And there was dirt and there were plants this big coming out of it. And I had met Patty and Dave, and I thought, gee, I ought to call the city because somebody ought to come out here. I mean, what are plants doing growing out of our drainage ditch? And that's why I brought those pictures, you know. The day after the rain, myself and our other neighbors, we went over to open their house up, and it was just a disaster. I mean, there was water everywhere inside their home. Their carpet, you could just step on it, and the water just squished on your feet. They had taken things off their counters, I think, because of earthquake proofing and things like that. We picked everything up we could. Bruce and I, who will speak in a minute. But the water was, when I went through, what happened to me, I went through at a Chrysler Hemi. I went through the water real slowly. I know how to drive in rain. I used to be an international flight attendant, so I've driven all over the world. And I came through it real slow, and I went through that little dip. The water came up above the roof of my car, It didn't break over the car, it went forward. I had a witness with me. We went, oh my gosh. So we went home, went up and parked, got into the drain on our thing to make sure water was coming out of our backyard so it wouldn't be flooded, and turned around and the whole front part of my car was ripped off. I guess it's called a spoiler, and it ripped into the car. Well, I took it, I had it towed over to the insurance place, and I put a claim in, and I was rejected. And my company completely totaled the car because the whole computer went. I mean, all the dials went off on the car, nothing worked, the back lights started going out. So they completely totaled my car because of that. And if that drain hadn't been clogged and even been working a little bit, and the part that she's talking about had been happening, that wouldn't have happened. So that was very shocking and inconvenient, you know. So I really am supportive of your doing something about this and
Get in there.
making sure that the plants aren't growing out of our drains and things. I know it doesn't rain out here very often, but when it does, I guess. I saw the clouds coming that day. I went to the store actually, and I went, oh my gosh, I hope we get a little bit of this rain. It was a downpour. Costco went underwater, as you know. Did you know about Costco? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had a big problem there. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bruce Clark.
Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bruce Clark. I'm a neighbor of Patty Lauser. I'm at 79-900 Horseshoe, and I'm just here to support her. This Horseshoe Lake, as we call it, is a problem for everybody on this street. It plugs up the end of the street. Everybody has to drive through it. Our children can't even walk through it on their way to school when it's in full flood. This water, honest to God, is 18 inches deep sometimes. My pickup was drowned last August driving through it. The water came up, went into the intake, and totally ruined the engine. I just traded it in, so I don't have a claim, but, you know, I mean, this is a reoccurring problem. This drain they put in is a complete and utter joke. This French drain, it does nothing. You know, I mean, for a light rain, it's gonna work, but for something like we had last August, you know, it's just totally inadequate. This whole problem seems to be, I mean, what we're talking about today seems to be a matter of who's responsible for this. Looking into it, it's pretty obvious the golf course went against the city of La Quinta to establish this berm which prevents this water from draining. If you look out on the golf course, you know, like last August, there was a huge lake out there anyway. I can't see where the golf course can claim that they're trying to prevent damage to their golf course when that water drains from everywhere, and it is a huge lake on that hole and on the other one on our side of the street. Anyway, it's just unconscionable that this has been allowed to go on. What happened to Dave and Patty's house? I mean, I was there trying to help them, and you know, 3 inches of water in your house just doesn't cut it. And it could have been and should have been prevented years ago. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm just trying to support what's, you know, to get this resolved and to keep this from happening again to Dave and Patty. So anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Juan?
Good afternoon. Mayor, my name is Juan Pineda. I live at 78565 Bottle Brush Drive. And my issue is very, very light, and it's very easy. The only thing we're really asking for is kind of more of the principle of the thing. We have our dog, Fernando, whose license expired basically 2 days before he actually got neutered. And so we came in and we came to pay the regular fee. We're law-abiding citizens. We follow all the rules. And they wouldn't give us the opportunity to, they said, no, you have to pay this $20 late fee. And we showed, you know, that give us some leniency. You know, he just got neutered. We have to kind of wait for a schedule. It just doesn't happen, you know, on the day that we want it to happen. So the lady was she said, no, you have to go to the council meeting and request a waiver. So that's what we're here for. And again, it's not the $20, more the principle of the thing. You know, again, law-abiding citizens and He's doing very well. He hasn't slowed down as we were hoping he would. So he's still digging, but he's doing fine, thank you. Yeah, this was just last week, and so we're just basically asking for consideration for that.
Yeah. Well, and I got the report yesterday, and I had a conversation with our city manager this morning about that thing, and we're going to work at correcting that situation.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
My pleasure, thank you. All right, I'm in the customer service business, so, you know, it's all good. Okay.
Okay, Philip Pettibone?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I think all of you have heard of me. My name is Phil Pettibone. I've been a resident in La Quinta Cove since September of 1982 at 54105 Mendoza.
Can you give us your name and address?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm Phil Pettibone.
no,
Yeah,
address?
I've been a resident at 54105 Avenida Mendoza in the La
Good.
Quinta Cove
Thank you.
since 1982. On Monday, March 10th, a representative of the city of La Quinta, Mr. Anthony Marino, caused the unlawful removal of my 1991 Ford Mustang LX convertible that was secured onto a tandem axle trailer and legally parked on my driveway. This is also in conflict with a civil minute order issued by Superior Court Judge Evans on March 27th, 2013. La Quinta Code Enforcement has never received any complaints, which means the only person that was offended was Anthony Marino. It's clear that Anthony Marino is not concerned about the city of La Quinta or its residents. He has cost our city money and negative publicity on a national scale, and he continues to do so. How much negative press and money will it cost the city of La Quinta to pay back residents that were issued citations and fines for items that are not violations? And when was Anthony Marino given the authority to initiate violations without valid complaints? This is selective enforcement and a violation of our 14th Amendment constitutional right to equal protection of the law. Also, when was Anthony Marino given the authority to decide what is or is not visually offensive? This is subjective enforcement. I would strongly suggest that the council reconsider Anthony Marino's employment with the city of La Quinta, and if our elected leaders continue to tolerate or defend the malicious acts of our public servants, then La Quinta really is a great place to leave. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move forward to confirmation of agenda. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions by staff?
We have none.
By council members? No. Okay. We have no presentations this evening or written communications. I'll ask for approval of minutes. First, Susan, you have a correction?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Evans pointed out that there was a second missing on the business item number 2 on the last set of minutes, which was for March 4th. So I listened to the tape, and the second was Councilmember Henderson. So that's been added on the final copy of the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Move approval with the correction. Second.
This is for March 4th. Okay. There's been a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. I'll ask for approval of minutes of our special meeting of February 26.
Move approval. Second.
Moved in second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to the consent calendar.
Consent calendar.
Been moved in second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to our business session. We have 2 this evening. The first one is approval of pillars of the community nominations. Staff report, please, Edie or Justin? Whichever.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. We brought back the 2014 Pillars of the Community nominations for your review. We've included the additional biographical information that you've requested from the nominating groups, and we'll be working on our redesign of the process for future nominees that will encompass more information for you guys. Excuse me. We currently have 5 nominees in this program, and I'll read their names again for the record. Robert Ratty, resident since 2007. Ed Alderson, resident since 2000. Joan Rebich, resident since 1992. Richard Anderson, a resident since 2003, and Angel Rojas, resident since 2003. Additionally, Ms. Phyllis Stuchel, the 2013 Senior Inspiration Award winner, will be included in the 2014 Pillar Program. And we will schedule a recognition event to be held on Thursday, April the 10th. With that, that's my report for you. I'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay, questions of staff? Excuse me, go ahead. No, just basically a comment. I know them all, but Angel and that, and reading his bio, sounds like he's doing a wonderful job in the community and that. So I have no problems with the 5 applicants.
Okay. And this was wonderful. We got to know something about all of these people, which I think is the way it should be. As I stated last time, this is such an honor, and it's perpetuity at its best. I would like to make a suggestion. I know that we're not talking about the form right now, but I don't see the need for the 25 signatures. I think that's just a big stumbling block for folks to try and get those. But on the revamp of it, I would like more detail about what the person has done, not only within our community, but perhaps on a regional basis too, for things that happen in the valley, because we're all one big family here, so to speak. But I have no problem at all with the nominees. It was great to be able to know what they've done.
Yeah, and thank you to staff for the quick turnaround on our request to garner more information. And again, thanks to Kay Wolf for bringing to light what she had on the 3 that were submitted by her and her team. And I'm very comfortable moving forward and just feel like I know more about them and look forward to meeting a couple of them in person that I haven't. So thank you for the quick turnaround and response to our request.
Okay, unless there's anything else. Oh, excuse me, Lee.
As well. You know, the Pillar of the Community Award is for those folks that, you know, provide quite a bit of service to our community from north to south. And one of the greatest things about our community are the people that serve this community, whether it be commissions and boards or these applicants here throughout, whether here in the village or Trilogy or wherever that may be here, and from the sports, helping the kids in their sports. So I really appreciate what they've done. And what I would ask is perhaps in the future, this nomination can go through the Community Service Commission first. Yeah. Let the Community Service Commission look at these nominations and get the information needed at that level before it comes to the council. But I agree that all of them should be awarded Pillars of the Community. It's a great award, and we've got some great names on there in the past. People like Kay Wolf and others, Lucia Moran and Diane Adolph and others that have served quite a bit in this community. And so I appreciate the commitment that these have shown as well.
And my comments would be congratulations to all of them. Well deserved.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second to please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to our second business item, and that's adopt a resolution approving issuance and sale of subordinate tax allocation refunding bonds by the successor agency to the dissolved redevelopment agency.
Mr. Mayor, we'll give this report. Since 1998, the redevelopment agency, or actually since 1988, the former redevelopment agency issued a series of bonds to raise capital to fund improvements here in the community. Some of those bond proceeds were used for affordable housing, and some of those bond proceeds, a majority, were used for infrastructure improvements and the like. When the redevelopment agency was eliminated in 2011 and in 2012, we still had bonds outstanding. And at that time, we could do nothing with them in order to take advantage of the lower interest rates. However, the legislature, in their wisdom, allowed us then to refund the bonds so we could reduce interest costs. And in December of 2013, we refunded about $120 million of bonds in order to reduce interest costs and reduce the annual payments made on those bonds. It's all part of our effort to live within our means and reduce costs wherever possible. We looked at that time of refunding our 2004 bonds, but we could not do so because the costs were prohibitive. In January of this year, we were contacted by a member of the bond team that said, basically, given where the bond market is, we could refund these bonds or refinance them and generate approximately $386,000 a year in annual cost reduction on the bond payments. We're bringing this action before you as the City Council, later as the successor agency, and if approved tomorrow, we're going to bring it to the Oversight Board to request you approving us moving forward to refund these so we could then, if we achieve the interest savings, obtain up to $386,000 of annual cost savings, which would be roughly $8.1 million over the life of the bonds. In doing this, we also understand that we're dependent upon the market. So if the market changes and we could not achieve these savings, then we would not move forward with this refunding. I say that because this needs to be approved by the state of California as part of the redevelopment dissolution activities, and as such, we must submit this to the Department of Finance, and they have up to 60 days to review this request, so the market may change. In addition, if we go forward with this refunding, we would then complete the refunding of all bonds that were outstanding by the redevelopment agency and would achieve about $700,000 to $800,000 in cost savings for the taxpayers here in the community, as well as the other taxing agencies. So we're asking for you to consider this, and again, by doing this, it doesn't mean we're going to achieve this unless the market conditions are correct.
Okay.
Question.
Questions of staff?
Frank, what does this have to do with the city of La Quinta's general fund?
Okay. There's two aspects of what this would do. First off, it would reduce the amount of property tax revenue that the general fund receives, or excuse me, the property tax revenue that is paid to the general fund that is needed to service these bonds. So it would free up a portion of that revenue that we could then use for other purposes. Second, under the provisions of the redevelopment dissolution activity, the city needed to forfeit $41.3 million of loans that it had offered or originated to the redevelopment agency as part of the state's plan to disperse former redevelopment agency assets. So we had to pay out in October of 2013 $41.3 million out of our reserves, which reduced our liquid reserves down to roughly $6 million. What this will do is, again, free up property tax revenue that goes for bond payments and would allow us, under another provision of the redevelopment elimination scheme, to get those loans repaid over the next 30 years. We do have a outstanding question with the state that has said that even though the agency had $41.3 million of legitimate loans that are repaid to the city, the state now is disputing about $6.5 million of that amount, saying that, well, really, you're not due that money. So it'll do two things. It'll increase by a small amount, since we're a low property tax city, money that would go to the general fund for general purposes, and second, it would increase by a greater amount money that then could be used to repay those outstanding loans once again.
Well, if I was just a resident of the community and occasionally came down to city council meetings, I'm not sure I'd understand a word you just said. And it is that complex, and that's part of the reason that I'm bringing this up. Because when you talk about the city sending the state of California $41 million, it kind of sounds like we didn't know what the heck we were doing with our money. And without spending the rest of the afternoon and maybe the rest of the week trying to explain that to everyone, I just want it to be clearly understood out there that almost all of the actions that we take in regards to the redevelopment agency and the transactions that took place are because the state of California decided to do away with a tool that this city had and used legally for the entire time of its incorporation. Just one day woke up and said, you no longer have that tool. And we have since then been trying to figure out how to deal with all that, and we've done a pretty darn good job, and I thank you for that. This is just another step in hopefully seeing the end of all of this. So thank you very much.
And it wasn't that we stood back and did nothing, because we took it to the state Supreme Court and they ruled against us, so.
But we also recognize we need to move forward and continue
And-
generating revenue and economic
That's right.
development.
Yeah.
And yes, so
But
we'll
basically,
work to
Frank,
continue to make those savings.
and what you said in regards to this issue, fiscally, it's in our best interest to go ahead and support this bond issue.
It's in our best interest as long as the current market interest rates
Right.
hold. If they don't, then again, we will not do
We will
this.
not act.
And I should also add that the only way those working on this bond issue get paid is if the bonds are sold. So if they're not sold, then they do not get paid for their work.
Yeah, and if I can, Mr. Mayor, you know,
Okay.
like with the refinancing we just recently underwent, you know, we put this refinancing package together, and it was approved by the state of California, and then we held it and waited for the market. And we entered the market at the most opportune time, and it saved us quite a bit of money. You know, interest rates are going up, and we know that. So I think putting this together and then, again, waiting to see what happens in the market. I think the municipal bonds is about or California municipal bonds is about the only way to save money from the exorbitant taxes we have here in California. It's, you know, 60% nowadays. I think mutual bonds or municipal bonds is the way to go, but I think it's a good idea, and we need to do this. Hopefully interest rates don't continue to rise. It's good to know that the federal rate, or the Standard & Poor's financial rating for the city of La Quinta is A+. So we've got an outstanding credit rating with Standard & Poor's. I think it's better than the state of California. But, so,
How
you know,
unusual.
so I think this is the right thing to do for the right reason. Hopefully we'll get some recognition from Riverside County and other agencies that are gonna share in our savings, that they recognize their revenues are gonna, because of what we're doing. Whether we see that or not, I don't know. But, yeah, and it wasn't much just this governor and his politicals in Sacramento eliminated the redevelopment agency. They also, oh, by the way, we're also gonna take any assets away from you as well that you had in the redevelopment agency. So it was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, big challenge.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of staff? With that, I'll entertain a motion.
With that, I'll make a motion that we adopt a
Microphone.
resolution, adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds as listed on the agenda.
Second,
Okay.
010.
Resolution,
Waiting for-
Resolution 010.
2014-010.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. There's been a motion, a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to our study session. We have two this evening. The first one is discuss landscape and lighting assessment district 89-1 and results of North La Quinta landscaping option survey. Staff report, please, Tim.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to start this off and then
okay.
hand it over to Tim, and we're going to volley back and forth here.
Before we jump into that, if you wouldn't mind,
Please.
we have looked at an issue for Councilmember Osborne. His home is located more than 500 feet from the area, any of the areas at issue. However, there may be a situation of common area that's within 500 feet. We're not certain that it's common area that he has any ownership interest in, but assuming that it is, we did get an opinion from a real estate expert, Bruce Cathcart of La Quinta Palms Realty, that we have a copy of, and in sum and substance, Mr. Cathcart has opined that nothing that the council could be considering today or in this series of events relating to the landscaping would have any impact financially on Mr. Osborne's home or the common area if he has any interest in, if he it does in fact own an interest in it, so that this is available if anybody would like a copy of it.
We're not taking any formal action on this anyways.
Correct, but even the preliminary stuff, we wanted to get this clearance before Councilman Osborne proceeded, and we got it today.
Okay, thanks. All right.
I'd like to start off and basically summarize briefly how we got here. In 2012, you may remember that the city adopted an operating budget that showed a $2.1 million deficit, and that deficit was to be funded from the city's general fund reserves. At the same time, we were faced with the fact that the city's redevelopment agency was eliminated, and the city's redevelopment agency funded the city's capital improvement programs for many years. So at that point, the City Council directed staff to look at means to reduce the deficit, if not eliminate it, and to try to generate surpluses. So we went out and looked at a variety of things. One of the actions that we took was that in January of 2013, the city did a reduction in workforce that eliminated 25% of the staff, and at the end of the year, we were able to generate a $2.8 million cost reduction in our operating costs. So we have looked at a variety of options, and this was one of the options we looked at. That brings us here today as to the study session, where we'd like to review what it is that we were trying to accomplish and explore. How did we get here in terms of the landscape and lighting district, what the neighborhood meeting and survey results were, and then to lay out options that we were going to be seeking and asking for you to give us direction on, that we could come back to you at your May 6th meeting. What we want to do here is have a dialogue with you all and with the community, and we've been trying to do that over the past year when we've gone out and met with 35 homeowners associations and business organizations and sports associations to talk about the state of the city. Because together we want to figure out a way that we can look at what's important and how we maintain what's important here in the city. And if I may, just from an editorial standpoint, while we hear a lot and read a lot about what happens in the federal government and the state governments in terms of underhanded dealings and self-dealing and that's not what we do here at the City of La Quinta. So we're here to share information, to get input, and to have a conversation about where we should go in the future.
Thank you, Frank. So the program that we started last spring that Frank mentioned was an outreach that the City Council asked us to do to 11 subdivisions in North La Quinta to try and tackle the lighting and landscape deficit. When we did the outreach, we started by giving them the background on the city finances, some of which you've heard already. Since 2009, just the elimination of the redevelopment agency alone was a $60 million hit annually to the city. That drastically impacts our ability to deliver projects. Our CIP used to be in the $20 to $25 million range, and the one that we're going to propose tonight is less than $6 million. So it gives you an idea of
Tim, I'm sorry, can you tell them what the CIP is?
Oh, I'm sorry, the capital improvement program that funds the different projects that the city builds during the course of a year. That combined with the fact that the city is a low property tax city. It gets about a third of what some of the other cities in the valley get in terms of property taxes. And then, of course, the recession that hurt our other revenue sources was all explained at the workshops. And it becomes more and more of a problem to fund the lighting and landscape district deficit, which last year was about $300,000. It's been as high as $900,000. From the general fund, because that's the only other source of money that the city has to pay for this. On top of it, another goal that I thought would be worth talking to the residents about is just improving the look of the landscaping out there. Some of it's been out there for 20 plus years. The irrigation systems, frankly, are dated and cause erosion and other problems. We still have turf landscape in some areas that, of course, is going to become more and more of an issue as water gets more and more expensive. So I thought that if we could combine improvements with a reasonable assessment, that might make it palatable for some communities to switch over, and so that was the program. To understand how we got to this point, next slide. You need to understand a little bit about how the district was originally set up in 1989. It was set up under the Lighting and Landscape Act of 1972. It had much simpler requirements than what we have to go through today to set up a similar assessment district, in that an engineer's report was required that basically identified the expenditures and revenues that the district would take on. In this case, it was lighting and landscape maintenance. There would be a public hearing and a chance to hear from the public on the proposed assessments, but ultimately the city council could decide how to adjust the assessments up or down after the public hearing, and so it was within the council's purview how that was going to work. The formation of the district included 3 assessment zones. One was in the Cove, one was at PGA West, and one was north of Highway 111, which is the North La Quinta area that we're talking about now. Next slide. So looking back at the original 1989 formation document that created the district, the citywide benefit, that would be the benefit that pays for all of the medians on the major streets like Washington and Highway 111 and so forth, was $6. These are per year. The zone costs were, as you see, were $6 for the Cove, $12 total when added to the citywide amount, and then PGA West was $75 total, and north of Highway 111, which at the time only included the developments you see there, was $30 total. So what did these assessments cover, or what were they intended to cover? I need to clarify the first one because it did in fact include the parkway landscape maintenance. I was not clear on this before, I apologize for that. But that was part of the assessment, as well as the medians on the major arterials, irrigation and landscape maintenance is what that's supposed to say, the curbs, sidewalks, fencing, retention basins, and so forth. But the real interesting thing is that the parks maintenance was actually part of the original assessment district and could be included under that 1972 Act. Later, we'll see that that isn't the case, but at the time that the district was set up, it was. So, fast forward 5 years. In 1994, as we're going into the 94-95 fiscal year, the parcel rates have increased. The citywide benefit is up to $35 a parcel, and you can see that the Cove Zone is now at 43, PGA at 46, and North La Quinta, though, was at $78. Well, as you might imagine, this caused quite a lot of discussion at public hearings and for the district that year. And so the next year, when we came back, they actually, staff proposed some policy changes in order to alleviate some of this concern. The citywide benefits were changed from that $35 that you saw before to include the regional community parks. They were taken out of the subzones and added to the citywide benefit, as were the parkway and median landscaping on the major roads. The streetlights and traffic signals and the other items you see there were added, and the zones were collapsed or eliminated actually for the Cove and PGA West. The zone that remained in North La Quinta was for the entryway landscape maintenance only, and we'll have more on that in a minute. The idea was, though, by making the citywide zone larger or putting it into that benefit, that a CPI could be used at a later date or going forward in order to adjust that and make up for the maintenance cost increases that were anticipated.
Make sure you explain what the CPI.
Consumer price index of up to 5% could be added to the citywide assessments, and as well as the individual entryway landscape maintenance costs going forward. So these were the changes. Everybody seemed to think that this was a good idea in 1995 because it eliminated the subzone assessments in large degree, but still gave a way to finance this going forward. a diagram or a bar chart that was included in this feasibility study that was done in 1995 demonstrates how they thought that the district would work in the future in the finances. The left 5 years, it basically starts, that's 1990 to 1995 if you can't read it from the back. The blank or the where the arrow is pointing to on the diagram, those are the old subzone assessments that were being charged. They were all folded in and creating the large citywide benefit, which is the solid bar you see projected going on from 1996 through 2000. And you can see the effect of the CPI that was anticipating, allowing the revenue stream to grow over time as the district progressed. So, but that was the plan pre-Proposition 218, which took effect in July 1997. It was basically Prop 218 was put forward by the folks that thought that the cities were basically skirting the requirements of Prop 13 in setting up assessment districts, and they chose to try and close loopholes with this proposition.
So Proposition 218 was voted on by the people of the state of California.
That's correct.
Correct? All right.
And it was approved.
Yes.
It limited the assessments to maintenance of streets, streetlights, signals, medians, and sidewalks. These areas were considered exempt under the Prop 218 because they directly benefited properties. The general benefits, though, that were received by some of the buildings and public facilities that are listed there was removed from the district. The effect of that, and one other very important provision of Prop 218 was that any new or increased assessments would require a citywide vote instead of just including the CPI, instead of just the city council having a public hearing and adopting adjusted rates afterwards. So this was a game changer for sure for the lighting and landscape district. The effect on it was felt immediately. Next slide, please. In that the 1997-98 rates were reduced as follows. As you recall, the other district costs were quite a bit higher than these. The citywide benefit was locked in at $35.60. The other 6 subzones in North La Quinta were locked in at this rate. And it limited, the total revenue was reduced by a grand total of over $185,000 just in order to comply with Prop 218. The individual entryway landscape charges were actually never charged. They were absorbed by other funds, and so basically the citywide benefit of $35.60 was established that year, and that's what we've had to go with ever since. So instead of having that nice increase in revenues that was projected back in 1995, we have the following chart, which the green line is basically showing you the revenues that were that have been collected by the city since that time. They are relatively flat. The fluctuations, the initial dip you see is the Prop 218 effect, and then it starts coming back up because more units or more homes are constructed in the city, and so the $35.60 starts bringing the total revenues up over $1 million. We also have, depending on how much money we have in the stormwater program, we've also offset some costs with that over time. But by and large, the revenues to the district have stayed pretty much the same since 1995. The next line above it is the lighting and landscape right-of-way maintenance costs. They include all the parkways, medians, and so forth. And you can see that basically starts splitting and going above the revenue line right around 1997. Up until that point, sometimes we had surpluses actually in the district in certain years, but soon after 1997, the costs started increasing, And without being able to adjust for CPI or anything else like that, they went quite a bit above the revenue line. It got to, in 2009 is when it hit the peak of about $900,000 more than was collected. And then by reducing some of our maintenance costs and basically reducing service levels, if you will, we don't oversee retention basins and so forth anymore. We brought that line closer, but in 2013, there's still a $300,000 gap between the red and the green line. And then the parks maintenance, which, like I said, was in the original district. You can see that adds a significant more amount to the city's landscaping budget. And in fact, it got over the $3.5 million total with the other costs in 2009. Now it's just under $3 million total for the cost for the landscape lighting in the right-of-way and the parks. So it's about it's about $1.4 million in the red as of 2013. So now on the so the results of the summary were taken back in January after we held workshops and put out the information on possible scenarios for renovating, landscaping, talked to the homeowners who were willing to participate in what could possibly be included. The results for Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3 were all very similar. In that only about, in case of Zone 1, about 32% said they might support an assessment at a lower level. The Zone 2, the largest zone, had about 37.3% in support at a lower amount. And then the Zone 3 folks are at about 30.4%. There's a breakdown in one of the attachments in the report, and also Jim McGuire from Wildan is here if we want to discuss the zone results in detail. So what is that? So what options are there? Some of these are very familiar since they've been in the district budget quite often discussed, and the challenges on each are still there. The first one is to do a capital project or some other means of reducing the landscape maintenance cost by just purely reducing the landscaping out there. That could be one option, either in supplanting it with more hardscape, rock, DG, that sort of thing, so that we can reduce both our utilities costs and our maintenance costs. The second bullet is the citywide special or general tax. And there's challenges with each in terms of voting requirements, but in general, a citywide special tax would be, if it was set up just for landscaping or landscaping in parks, would take a 2/3 requirement. A general tax for that doesn't say this specifically, but would be just a general tax for the city would be a 51% requirement. Replacing the lighting and landscape district with a CFD or community facilities district is another option. A community facilities district is just is also a special tax, though, so it requires a 2/3 requirement by the property owners to excuse me, that one requires just the voter approval, but it's still a 2/3 requirement. We could look at further reductions in the level of landscape maintenance. However, that, of course, has consequences long-term in terms of the aesthetics of the landscaping that the city has obviously a huge investment in. And then the last option is what we've been doing, is basically continue to fund the deficit from the general fund. With that, I'll stop there. As I said, Jim McGuire, myself, are here to answer any questions you might have. Mr. Mayor.
Good. Thanks, Tim. Questions of staff? Fine. Okay. Christine, yeah.
So, Tim, we have the knowledge now that we didn't have. I don't think we had when we had the workshops that the they're not HOAs, but these developments don't own those properties, and we don't own them, so isn't that part of the key to a decision that we need to make?
Well, we do have a slide, and we did, as you are aware, we did go and actually have preliminary title reports taken out on the parkways because we were asked this question. In general, you can see the red parkways. The top line is Fred Waring, and the medium is, the midpoint there is Miles Avenue. Adams is running right down the middle of this diagram. The red indicates parkways that were offered for dedication but never actually accepted by the city. And that involves some dealings with the way that the final map was processed and so forth. But
Wait, can we back up for a second?
Sure.
All right. What would be the city's reason for not accepting dedication other than maintenance or whatever?
Well, it can be, it's normally because the areas are unimproved. Sometimes that way it's done on roadways as well, that they're subject to a completion of improvements within the easement that we're talking about. That could be one reason why they were never accepted or were not accepted, at least at the time that they were offered with the developer's map.
So then that would create, if, as happened in this case, the developer went bye-bye and we didn't accept the dedication, then that puts that property in limbo, in essence.
It potentially could, because
Well, it has in this case.
Yeah, well, the underlying fee owner is likely not an existing company or
Okay.
or person.
So then what do we do with respect to that? I mean, doesn't someone have to own the land? I mean, doesn't...
Well, you know, not necessarily. I mean, we had issues with, I can tell you, with retention basins that were never actually dedicated to the city, and people later on, because taxes weren't paid on them, tried to buy them as regular lots. And so it happens more often than you might imagine. But
Who's on these tax rolls? Who's paying the taxes on these properties?
these are mostly defunct development entities, old LLCs from the original developer, who probably the LLC is no longer in existence.
Well, I think, to me, ownership of the property is important before we try to find a solution. I mean, to me, that's kind of key, so
That's obviously part of our discussion when we look at what direction we want to provide
Right.
and how do we address that. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Just to finish, since we're on this diagram, the area that is in black and yellow, and it's on, if we can point to it, on Miles and then both sides of Adams, is actually dedicated easements to the city that have been accepted. And then there is one parkway at the very south end of Adams that is it is in fact owned in fee by the city, and why I couldn't begin to tell you, because normally we just accept easements even for right-of-way for roadways.
You done? Okay. Lee, anything?
Well, you know, I don't know that I don't have any questions per se. I mean, we've got parcels here that are owned by defunct developers that are long gone, so there's no ownership per se that we can go to that group and handle their own responsibility for the property they own. So that is a challenge. But, you know, well, no, I don't have any questions. I have some comments that I'll save for later, but I don't have any questions right now.
Terry?
A couple of issues, if I could. I don't know about the mayor, but I know that I've been in 18 different serious conversations about this situation. That's 18, one for each year of 18 years. And each time there is a little bit of new news that comes out, and I can understand that. And with people that did work here, you can't tell any of us why maybe the Public Works Director from 15 years ago did or did not follow through with the appropriate procedures. So we don't have that record of why it was done or why it wasn't done. All we really know at this point is that we have a deficit. We also know that we had a 25% reduction in our revenues for our general fund, which is what operates the city and pays this particular project, if you will. We didn't have any control over that deficit of the 25% reduction. It was the economy. We also know for the last 18 years that the folks that have been involved in doing this labor have had increases in their payroll. Their businesses have had increased taxes put on them. Their costs have gone up. We have been dormant. And for the most part, we've been dormant because this city council, and maybe not you guys, some of you were and weren't, didn't want to assess anymore. We didn't want to go that way. So we were in a position, because we had a redevelopment agency, a legal entity within this city, we were able to function knowing full well that it still wasn't appropriate to be doing it the way we were. We should have gone to an assessment. And we did not make that decision. So here we are, and we still have all the same questions. I'd like you to spend just a minute or two, if you would, to explain a benefit assessment, because that one's a tough one.
Well, if you're talking about, well, a benefit assessment is basically where you you assign special benefit, or a special benefit is determined in the case of an assessment district through an engineer's report, and that evaluates a number of things. Usually the proximity of the landscaping that we're talking about to the property is relevant in a benefit assessment district, or in the case of a parks assessment district, it would be the proximity of a parks facility. The Prop 218 requirement, though, is that you can only assess for special benefit, and that's the trick. You can't. The general benefit that is derived from any of those facilities has to come from general revenue sources.
Okay, if I could, for just
am I answering the question?
For just a second there. So, a benefit assessment district is what is legal. One of the options that's legally allowed for us to be looking at.
Yes.
And we don't control how that's put together. It's already put together by the language of a benefit assessment district.
Correct.
So, in some ways, our hands are tied too as to what we would rather do or rather not do. And I mean, I would rather see a general tax. And I have to keep looking down here at these specials and these generals, because they don't require the voting process correctly, in my opinion. But the general tax requires a 51% approval, correct?
Correct.
However, and that would be citywide. However, we can't designate it. We can't tell you that we're going to use this for police service or for lighting and landscaping. It has to be you trusting us doing what we should do with that tax. So the other way is, if we designate it, that's a benefit assessment district, correct?
That's correct.
So, and if you do a benefit assessment district, some of you are going to be paying more than others, because the engineer's report, that's the way it's set up. And it is tricky, and it's nasty, and it's not nice, and I think this is why we haven't tried to get to the end of it in 18 years. But here it is before us, and we need to do that. We need to find out, are you going to trust us on a general tax that's citywide, that we're going to use it for, I mean, we can't tell you and designate it for lighting and landscaping. I'd like to, but then we go to a benefit assessment. So there's a couple things for you folks to think about too, as you know, and mill about and kind of spend 18 years on it and see what you can come up with. So I'm seeing this as like the first of 2 study sessions. So I'll kind of sit back and listen to everybody else. I thank you for letting me go on and on and on and on. But anyway, that's where I would like to be, is a general citywide tax. That would be reasonable. But you guys got it. I can't tell you. It's going to be for lighting and landscaping.
Okay. Linda?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Terry has got a good point, and Terry and I have been on the council for quite a few years, and we've been through this, and especially these last few years where we were in a recession period, and that it was not our intent to try and tax our citizens, although we have probably one of the lowest tax rates for the city of La Quinta in this whole valley, and that you pay basically to the city $35 a year, and that's pretty reasonable for everything that we provide. And that I guess, you know, I look at it, and some years ago, those of you who've been around for a while understand, you know, we had a situation, I can't even remember how many, it's been 7, 8 years ago, where the fire department came to us and said, you know, that 9 out of 10 calls that we get are for medical services, and that we had no paramedics in this city, and we said, you know, this is not reasonable. This is, I mean, this is a matter of life and death, and we needed paramedics, and so we put it on the ballot not once but twice, and it was turned down. And if you can't get people to look at medical responses where you're talking about life and death, you know, how are we going to handle this with landscaping and we totally understand. Nobody likes taxes. You know, we're the last ones in the world to want to tax, and we don't want to, but we're getting to the point where we're going to have to work together as to how we're going to do it. I'm not totally in favor of this assessment. I think I'm prone to go along with Terry. Now, I live at PGA West, and I pay for lighting and landscaping big time because we do have all those right-of-ways that we maintain ourselves. And I pay for it in my homeowners association fees and that. Those of you who have live in the non-gated communities, but in communities and that, we've all these years have maintained it as much as possible. And I know I've worked many times when I had complaints from the residents there that said this wasn't being done, and I'm all over Tim and his staff going out there and correcting it. And I'd love to continue to be able to do this. I'd love to say, look, this is city-owned property, which it isn't, that we should maintain it because we are interested in a beautiful city. We say we're the gem of the desert, and that's the reason. We want to be the gem of the desert. We want everybody to be proud of our city and that. And how do we do this? Well, we have to work with our citizens in that. And it isn't a matter of a lot of money if we make a general increase in our lighting and landscape district. The assessment, yes. Some of these, from what I've heard, is, you know, really a little on the steep side, and I'm not for that. And that's not our intent. So, you know, I think it's up to this council to do what we can to resolve this problem and not put the burden on certain elements of our community, meaning the people in the northern part of the city of La Quinta. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Anyways, Ali, you wanted to. General comments?
Well, I'll wait.
Well, again, I thought we were on question.
Excuse me, I'm controlling this.
Very well, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. As we've seen here, and as this whole thing has shown us on the council and the city staff, that the issues were created long, long ago, and we have chosen to whether ignore some of these issues or just hope that, you know, as time tests, we can bring these up. The landscape and lighting district at $35.60 per household in the city of La Quinta, which has been there since 1970 or 1998, obviously our costs have gone up. Obviously they have, and we all know that. And the survey for North La Quinta has shown us that for the most part, that the entryways and the landscaping on the parkways are adequate to the extent today. But as you've seen here, and we've cut our costs in our operations, you know, we've cut close to $3 million in the last year. And some of that cost has been cutting costs and service to these parkways and the maintenance of these parkways. We can't continue that. We've got to do something about that. But when you've got these lots owned by defunct developers, who pays it? You know, I mean, I live in the Bella Vista, and we have our own annual fee for the maintenance of those areas, the entryway and the parkways. So we pay for it. We pay $400 a year.
Wow.
to pay for that.
Wow.
But, you know, a lot of you bought homes in North La Quinta understanding there are no fees there, and that may have been why you bought that property. But nonetheless, we need to do something. We need to do something, one, from the city's financial standpoint, that we don't continue a leak in the boat, so to speak, with this red going on. I'd rather just see a simple $20 increase in our landscape and lighting from $35 to $55. We've already seen in the past reports that will cure the red, so to speak, in our landscape and lighting. And a simple $20 fee across the city would seem to be the simplest approach to this whole thing. But we do need to approach this issue in some manner or form. We can't just let that red ink stay out there. We've got to do something. And North La Quinta has told us, you know, we don't want to raise the fees up here. This isn't a problem that was created by the residents of North La Quinta. This was created a long time ago. And I talked with an individual last week, you know, and to understand the timing standpoint, back in the early 90s when this happened, this was the fall of the savings and loans industry. And when a lot of developers lost funding because of the savings and loan. And that's what occurred back then. It's like 10 years from today, we'll wonder what happened in 2008 and 2009. Well, that's because we had one of the worst recessions in the history of our country. So understanding, one, the history of why this was created, understanding where we are today from the survey. And Tim, I want to thank you and your staff for what you've done here. It hasn't been easy. I know you've taken some heat from folks. But we had to find out where this came from and where we are today and how we're going to approach this going into the future. Again, my hope is that we can do a simple increase in our landscape and lighting. It will go before the vote. And as Councilwoman Henderson said, it's a general vote. It's a general revenue. We cannot specifically state it's for one item. So we've got to be able to work within those rules given to us by Sacramento. It's interesting, Sacramento is currently looking at legislation to make that 2/3 vote down to 50+1. But as we all know, nothing comes free from Sacramento. They're much better taking things away than they are giving. So we have our doubts there and a lack of trust there from Sacramento. But needless to say, we are here. We do need to deal with this issue. And I don't think a separate assessment for North La Quinta is the answer, but I think we're going to have to do something citywide coming in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Linda?
Again, I thought we were on questions, not comments. So I'm happy to give my comments now, or we can hear from the people who have
Well,
requested to speak.
Would you rather?
Doesn't matter to me.
Your decision.
You're in charge.
Well, okay. Follow up with us.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Okay.
let's listen to
All right.
the audience and that.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. All right. Council owns this, whether it's the past council, our current council, and whatever the future council brings. We had money at a time that the group chose to continue to pay for that. I get that. But we own it. We own this process. We own the direction to staff to send you out there to seek this information. We'll own the abuse, the feedback, but this is exactly, I think, what I was looking for in terms of the education and outreach that we were seeking from the community in exploring the level of interest, awareness, education, and we've learned things along this process just like all of you. So I first and foremost want to thank you, because a 44% return on a survey is unbelievable. Granted, there was a motivation, but nonetheless, it's really impressive that once that word got out and you all came to the table, you told us exactly what you thought and what you felt and what you expect from the city of La Quinta, and that's why you put us in this position to help you do that with the information you give us. So number one, thank you so much for the survey and the feedback you've given us. I don't believe in some of the options that have been expressed, like reducing the level of maintenance, because we also have committed to a standard of quality within the La Quinta, medians, roads, everywhere, and we need to maintain that standard. Granted, it comes with a cost. I am definitely interested in looking and or giving staff some ideas to explore. Number one, seeking out that title ownership for all those unknown pieces of land. Just get them under our belt if we can do that and it doesn't cost us much, so that that question is answered and we can then attack that problem. Looking at right now, if we're at a $300,000 deficit for the maintenance we're currently doing, is that a fixed number? Is that something that we expect might increase if we increase the standard or the quality? Is it acceptable right now, the status of those areas? I know we need irrigation improvements. We need a lot of improvements there. Is 300 a approximate number?
Well, I don't think we can cut much lower and not even have a more impact on these parkways,
right,
in particular, because as I mentioned, we stopped overseeding retention basins. We stopped putting out the annual color. We reduced our maintenance contract quite a bit 2 years ago by about 15% in efforts to close that gap. At this point, I couldn't tell you we could get it less than 300,000 without an impact.
Well, and maybe 300, if this is what it looks like for 300, may not cut it either based on what we expect in terms of our city. But then again, it comes with a cost. So if that's not the amount, we have to look at what is the amount. I think that we need to look at other ways to fund the deficit. Are there grants out there? Is there rebates with CVWD for water conservation to do some turf reduction, like we've done at City Hall and a lot of the other areas? I understand Terry's and Don's feeling on the general citywide tax. That really is an entirely separate issue than what we're dealing with now, which what you said is a separate study session to explore. And they have spoken that you do not want a special assessment tax. Therefore, we really can't go out and put it on a ballot right now because it would just die. And that is an expense we shouldn't incur, knowing the feedback you gave us. So I get that budgetary component. But we also have this $41.4 million that we're fighting with the state to try to get back over a period of time. And there is that possibility that as that comes in, we can look at a portion of that to help fund this area. But then I would then go back out to the community to say, help us figure out. We've taken care of our own house. We've taken care of our staff, their benefits, pension plans. We've gone out and looked at development fees, sports fees, senior center fees. So we challenge the staff to go down that checklist to say, how do we better manage our expenses? This is just one of those things in the checklist that's coming to light. So I'll go back and ask the residents, if we look at owning some of this, how are you going to help us come up with those solutions to help fund that deficit? That's all I've got for right now. But again, thank you so much for the survey, because you told us how you felt, and that's what we asked for.
Yeah, the reason I wanted us to listen to us, because it may impact what those who have requested to speak will say, because I want you to know how we feel here on the city council, and that so when you respond that you get a rapport between our feelings and your feelings, and that as to the direction that we need to go. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'll call you if you'd come up to the podium, give us your name and address for the record, and if you could keep it to 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it in that. First one I have is John Lacto.
Yes.
Okay, you came early.
Well, I spoke last week, 2 weeks ago,
sure.
And thank you very much for all the explanation of what you think about it. It changed completely what I have to say today. It cleared up a lot of things. The only thing I don't understand is why Mr. Tim Jennison asked for a raise of I will say, almost $1 million when you got only a deficit of 300,000. So I would like him to answer that question.
Are you comfortable with Mohammed?
I can explain the part of the improvement program that I was talking about when we put together some scenarios for making some improvements to both the irrigation system as well as replacing the dead or dying landscaping out there involved some pretty big numbers in order to replace the landscaping and the irrigation. Jim McGuire can give you more detail on this, but basically if you look at all three zones combined, there's over 1 million square feet of landscaping that potentially could be replaced. Yeah. The cost for doing that is a big number. It would be in the $10 to $11 million range if we were going to do that. Is that necessary? Probably not. But we were trying to give the residents an idea, okay, if you wanted to replace it, about how much would that assessment be? And so that was the genesis for those numbers. So it's not an ongoing maintenance cost. It was the cost of actual capital improvements and the financing to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, but the way the referendum was made was, okay, we'll charge you maybe $45 or $600. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't tell us, how much you're gonna charge us. And on the top of all this, at the end, it said, we reserve the right to raise you anytime we want. I don't think it's make any sense.
Well, you just heard that's not possible.
Yeah. It's not going to happen. The council is not in favor of this assessment.
Okay, so anyway, the answer that he gave me that he raised the assessment to $1 million, please consider that. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Dolores Quinta? Okay.
My name's Dolores Lucchina. I live at 79665 Starflower Trail.
Thank you.
Cactus Flower. You did answer some of my questions, and I do know quite a bit about subdivision work, and Christy Franklin asked one of the right questions. Approximately 20 years ago, people sitting in those same seats that you are now occupying, or even in Tim's spot, I see they were anxious to have those homes, the 1,600 homes, developed. They, like you saw, tax money would flow into the city. There's nothing wrong with that. I agree with that. But they agreed to the subdivision regulations at the time, meaning carrying for the border lands and areas at their cost. But now I see from your report, all the red over there, you claim nobody owns it. Actually, that's your fault, because that's part of subdivision requirements and the engineer to make sure everything's going to be covered. The city's financial staff knew about cost and should have budgeted those funds year after year for service they have to provide. My voice is terrible. As costs went all up, all of us needed to make adjustments. Their responsibility also, it appears, the vision not only in La Quinta, but all the Coachella Valley seemed to be to turn the barren desert into a tropical paradise by planting non-native plants and installing irrigation systems. Now to solve your problem, and I repeat, your problem, you want more money. That's not solving the problem. The city needs to live within its means and work with funds it has collected. Mr. Mayor, during your State of the City address in February, you touted about $700,000 surplus the city has, and expenditures down some $2.3 million. That's wonderful, very great. And you and your team need to be congratulated. Congratulations. But you need to be prudent with the surplus and invest it wisely. Why? Think ahead. There's a serious water problem, not only here in the valley, but the entire world. And recently, there have been earthquakes hitting close to home, and we have been warned about the big one. You need to build your reserves and have some idea of some of the costs if a disaster strikes. Often I see where money is being spent on Silver Rock. Why not use funds gathered from the golf course instead of using surplus funds? Live within your means. For your information, it appears golf seems to be going out of style, and the up-and-coming generation is more interested in biking and hiking and working out at the gym. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize this valley currently has some 124 golf courses. Frankly, my dear Mr. Mayor, the Quinta did not need Silver Rock. If reserve funds have to be used to keep it afloat, I stress, take care of your commitments first before you take on more expense. I'm against an increase in our city assessments. You mentioned 20 years ago the increase, and no guarantee once the current rate is tempered with, is my opinion, the door for additional increases is open. I see if you increase now, there's a possibility it's going to continue every time you want some money. So that makes me against it also. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Doris. Marty Butler. Been a long time.
It has, it has. I'm here on the other side of the fence. I'm as a resident.
Up so you,
Sure. Can you hear me now?
no, be a little louder, maybe.
Marty Butler. I live at 44180 Ocotillo Drive in Rancho Ocotillo. And, you know, I have one major request. I'd love for you to continue this item. We had many people that were going to come at 7 o'clock, and they were going to address the council, and they very much wanted to speak. And I was part of that problem because I got the word out to a lot of people, and a lot of people had an opinion. And with this being on at 4 o'clock, many of those people couldn't come because we have a mixture of retirees, but we also have a lot of working people in our neighborhood. And I learned something. I thought I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know that property wasn't deeded over to the city. And I also liked hearing you guys talk about this and talk about the concern and the angst that you had amongst each other. Because believe me, being out there in the trenches, I have heard everyone say everything bad and suspicious about everybody here. And the lack of trust of the government to know they're trying to screw us over, it's very hard to get your point across. It's very hard to say, you know, we need to get together, we need to talk about this. No, we're not going to talk at all about it. We don't want to spend any money. And I've talked to some very dear people in Cactus Flower, in Rancho Highlands, and Rancho Ocotillo, and most of them are very, very afraid of having to spend any more money. They simply don't have it, and you pointed out the recession and what's happening in their lives at this point in time. So I guess I'm with that small group of people that's more open to putting some money toward this issue, and I've had people become very angry with me, so I quit talking to them about it, to tell you the truth. And I just said, hey, you know, whatever the main group is, but it's nice to come down here and see that you guys care about what's happening, because the basic feeling that I get from people in North La Quinta is that nobody cares. You're all from the south side of the city, and I would stress to you over and over again, I think it's really needs to be constructive. We need to look at ourselves as one city, and you are doing that. So kudos to all of you. I really appreciated hearing that. That diffused me back there, and you know, I want to say it's great. I had a thought, and I talked with Tim about it, and but I also think that if you're going to go for a citywide assessment, and you have my support, I'm almost thinking that if we could have a committee from each community over there, maybe make the committee 10 people and drag them all in and re-educate them, not just have the few people like ourselves that are interested in really upgrading our landscaping, because we're in the minority, and get some other people, a mixed group on each committee, and have them meet and discuss it. Then they filter out and go and talk to their other neighbors. That's a way of really communicating, because, well, I was frankly very surprised. We were going to have about 25 people that were going to come down tonight, but most of them wanted to vent. So if you do continue this item and bring it up again, there will be that, but I really wish they could have been here. You know, it's funny, I just said, oh, we're going to go down and ask for continuation. Don't worry, let's hope we get another meeting on this. I wish they had come for the presentation.
They can hear this meeting on the website.
I don't even know if they'll check into the website.
You could post that on their Facebook
It's
page.
very frustrating trying to get out to the community and talk to people. And I've had dear people say to me, no more taxes, I can't pay.
Well,
What am I going to say to that
We
person?
are having a second study
Yeah.
session.
This is
Oh,
a study
good.
session, so no
Terrific.
decisions are made,
Terrific.
Marty. And
Okay.
this issue will be brought back.
Okay, that is wonderful, that solves that problem, but then I had one other thing that a lot of people were concerned about, and I don't know if it was rumor or not, so I come to you for clarification. And that is, we met with him and the County of Riverside people, and they're building a noise attenuating wall on Rancho Ocotillo's side. Now suddenly I've heard they're not building the wall, and they're not replacing the landscape they destroy. So I want clarification on that.
You're talking Fred Waring?
Yes.
No, unless something's happened
Yeah,
in the last
they're
week.
required by the agreement
Okay.
that we signed on the MOU to do just that, put the
Okay,
wall
so the
in.
wall
And-
is still going in?
Yes.
And whatever they destroy landscaping, okay,
Yes.
terrific. Thank you very
And
much.
that's Riverside County, so
Yes.
we'll make sure they do it.
Right, but I all of a sudden was getting comments that the wall's not going to be built, and would you please ask about it? So, terrific. I know. Just let me know when you're having another study session. I'd
Next
really
meeting,
be
right?
happy.
Right?
May 6th. Is it going to be at 4 or 7? I'd really
And
appreciate 7.
we'll make it a little later.
Yeah,
right?
because you have,
Make it a 7
you
o'clock.
do.
Yeah.
You're going to get some venting, but, you know, but if we can get to this idea of something like a committee or whatever, I think maybe we can make some progress with you.
Sure.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Yes.
Marty. Whoops.
Venting is part of the process. That's
It's
a whole
true.
part of the
It's
process.
true.
And that's
I
how
know.
we get information. If you can tell that we have a lot of angst about this too.
Sure.
But this
Which-
is what we want
which
to hear.
isn't
We don't want you
transmitted,
to come
yeah.
here and give us a bunch of good news that isn't true.
Yeah,
So
sure.
venting is part of the process. We're okay with that.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just wanted to
Marty-
forewarn you, so.
Marty, we do have one council member from North La Quinta.
I know who you are because we said your name when we were
Thank you.
discussing
Thank
who's
you.
on the council. I always pop up and say, wait, and then I get well, he's in an HOA, so anyway, that shoots down that one. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty.
But he's also paying $400 a year for his landscaping.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's Dale or Fraley, excuse me? Is it Dave?
That's Dale.
Dale, okay.
Yeah. Good evening. Dale Fraley, 45095 Summerbrook Court, Desert Pride area. I just kind of have I guess, a couple clarifications. In the staff report on page 3, but they're not actually numbered, but it's on page 3 where it talks about the landscape survey results. Each one of the zones, it makes reference to the statement, total respondents indicated that they might support a new assessment. However, in the slide presentation, it didn't use that wording. It said might support a lower amount. So what's the difference? Because the staff report says new assessment, the slide said a lower amount.
Yeah, I saw that.
Well, even a lower amount would be a new assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, but lower amount as compared to what?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's,
Much lower than the proposed is basically the staff
well,
report.
I'm thinking it's lower than the $35. I don't know.
No,
That we know
that's-
isn't an option.
That was not part of the survey. No, it
That
was,
one's
it
the
was
only thing
on the
that's
amounts that were proposed, what would you support? And those percentages indicated a much lower amount than what was shown.
Okay. All right. And still along with those survey results, I'll use Desert Pride in Zone 3. It says 30.4% of the total respondents indicated that they might support a new assessment. However, if you go to the attachment 3 with the assessments, I don't see that question there at all. So I don't know where that percentage, I was curious as to where that percentage came from.
Probably would be best if Jim McGuire explained that, because I had similar questions. Might give him a chance.
Because if you look, I guess at what would be close to that on the survey where it says level of support for no change, all of those are 62, 53, 63%. So I don't know where that 30% was coming from on that. Also, I wanted to speak kind of about the workshops that you had. I know that I personally was only notified of the November 16th workshop, and I understand there was at least one other meeting related to involving Desert Pride. And it kind of goes along the same lines as with the survey. When I started, I think it was the Thursday, I think the deadline was on a Friday, and the Thursday before I started talking to my neighbors about them doing it, and I started talking to them and started finding out that they didn't know what the heck I was talking about, that they had never received a survey. And of course, naturally I asked, well, you're a property owner, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, you're not a renter or anything like that. Of course, I already knew those answers, and they said, of course. And so then I contacted the city on Friday about it, saying that, I think it was at least 10 or 12 people that I talked to that said they'd never received a survey. And they basically, I asked them, I said, well, can I make a photocopy of the survey and give it to them to submit, to fill out and then all hand carry it? And they said no, because it needed to be in the envelope that it was mailed with. And I thought the object here was to try and get as many results back. And then I started thinking about it, and on the surveys, I thought, well, how are they tracking? Because on the survey, the address is optional. But what you don't see, and I'm just asking a question, I'm not accusing anybody, is on your surveys that you see here, there's something missing. And that's a barcode that was down below here. So I don't know if that's why they wouldn't accept it, is because they were tracking them by the barcode or what. But I do know that there was at least 10 to 12 that I know of in Desert Pride that never received it and had no knowledge of the of the survey being taken. But I do want to say I do agree that something needs to be done. I do agree that the current $35 is way too low. I kind of agree with Council Member Osborne, and you know, he mentioned a $20 figure. That sounds reasonable. I mean, you got to think about the, you know, what's increased. But however, you know, a question like that was not on here on the survey. I mean, they had a thing where you said circle a dollar amount, but I didn't see any of those as a result of any of the survey things on there on the results sheet.
Right.
On there. So that's all I have to.
So remember now, if it's $20, it's a general tax,
Oh, yeah. I
and
know.
it's not dedicated.
I
Which
know.
is, as far as I'm concerned, it will go to lighting and landscaping, but I can't tell you that.
Oh, no, I fully understand what you're saying. I know. I'm familiar with another city that years and years ago, they did a utility users tax
Yeah.
or fee. And it was supposed to go for, they said it was gonna go for a specific thing. It didn't go there. But,
Yeah, you always worry about it.
but, you know, priorities change, you know. But I do agree that the $35 is too low, but I don't agree with, you know, I think our low end was $150, because that's $150 plus the $35, as it was explained to me. So now you're up to, you know, you got to look at it from a homeowner, well, that's $200. It's not you know, it's close to $200. It's not close to $150 anymore.
Yeah.
And I indulge you one more minute. As far as the, like in Desert Pride, I believe, on this ownership, I guess, type map, ours basically says developer owned, accepted by the city. I understand the developer owned, but what does that mean by accepted by the city?
Yes, they dedicate the property to the city, and then we take ownership.
Okay, so in Desert Pride with that coding, as it hasn't been deeded over to you yet, the developer still owns it? Or it has been deeded?
Defunct developer, we don't know where the developer went, you know. He built and then he sells it all out and then he disappears. And that property is in limbo right now.
Tim,
Mr. Mayor, no,
you have
that's not
something
the
to.
case. Around
right.
Desert Pride, basically, the city accepted it, so the city owns that parkway.
Okay, that's different than what is on Adams Street towards the south end of Desert Pride, where it's in blue, where it's identified as city-owned.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's city-owned, but the section that runs along Miles and then immediately down south of Adams that says developer-owned, accepted by the city, what you're telling me, that is owned by the city now?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Frank is, Tim is saying no.
No?
No.
No, the
Yeah,
black and yellow.
The black and yellow signifies, it's different from the red in that the black and yellow indicates it's still owned technically by the developer. There's a fee interest, which means actual ownership by some other entity. The city, though, accepted an easement, much like it accepts easements for right-of-way, utilities, and other functions, but does not incur a fee ownership of the property at that time. So that's the distinction. It's a subtle one, but it's important.
But if the developer is found, would he deed it over to the city, or is that just an option that he has?
That's one possibility.
Or I guess whoever
Right.
whoever owns that asset, whether it's a bank or some other.
Minute possibility.
Yeah.
I think we'd get really right in the middle of that one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dale.
Good job.
Richard Gray?
Hello, thank you. Richard Gray, 44120 Camino Azul in Rancho Cotillo. And I do agree very much with what Marty said, and I thank you very much, everyone here, for all of the discussion and the opinions and the understanding. I would like to make a couple little observations and comments. One of the things on Sealy, the northwest, in the southeast corner of Sealy and Miles, there's 2 dog parks. Who pays for those?
City?
Okay, so that's under the landscape lighting, or is
No,
that a separate?
that's parks.
That's Park and Rec.
And parks is upside down by $1 million.
Okay, all right. Well, then, I mean, if you raise the L and L, then you would have a little bit more money for parks.
Yeah, you got that right.
Another little observation is along the Fred Waring from Washington to Adams, where all that new beautiful median landscaping was put in. Who owns that and who's paying for that, and where are the funds coming from? Come from the L and L?
City, if it's medians, it's a city.
Right, so an area that did not have landscaping to that degree now has significant landscaping, which means that you've increased the cost of your landscaping and lighting funds to pay for that.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
right, but that's part of the
correct.
city. And
That's part of growth.
I know, but what it is, it's a very interesting thing for those of us who are citizens here, when in a sense what I took, and maybe other people that also took this, is that the city's opinion was that we were all at error. We were all taking advantage and were parasites on the rest of the city because we were getting this landscaping and lighting basically for free. And, you know, that I think is one of the reasons that maybe an awful lot of people had a little bit of an adverse reaction, because I agree with Marty, I agree with, I believe, a lot of other people that we do need to have the L&L increase from 98 to now at 3560. It's an extremely low amount. And if we want to keep the gym polished on all sides, we have to have enough money to take care of it. If we want to be different from Scottsdale, we have to have a lush look rather than everything being rocks and sand. And right now along Adams, I was there today with my little granddaughter at the Adams Park and in front of the fire station. The water is all just spurting straight up because there aren't little heads on the drip irrigation system. On the other side of Adams, there's sand all along the sidewalk because it's not retained, it's not, doesn't have a ground cover anymore, and it's coming down. So, I mean, we all know that there has been a real decrease in the maintenance of these properties. And I remember back on the road question of Fred Waring with the county. This was probably way back in March. At that time, I believe Tim was at the meeting, and he said the city will not put one more plant or one more light or one more irrigation or anything along Fred Waring. So I think at that time, the impression I got was that there was already kind of a decision saying that we're not going to maintain this area to the level that it had been maintained beforehand. And I understand you have the funding problem, but if we have a surplus right now, like one of the other people up here said, living within our means, there's a certain number perhaps of capital improvement projects that should be scaled out. Mm-hmm. I think if I read something here some time ago, there was like a total of 190 some million dollars worth of capital improvement projects over the future. And you know, if we only have a few $100,000 or $2 million worth of surplus right now, I don't see how anybody's going to pay for $191 million. The other thing that I wanted to express for everyone is that when the information was originally given out to us, I don't think anybody said the fact that financing for the $11 million, $11 million, would have to come through bonds or loans, and that we would be paying a significant amount of that on interest. I ran a spreadsheet, and at least for me, looking at a spreadsheet on several different interest rates, you'll go up to $5 or $6 million over that period of time if that happened. And that's one of the things that dissuaded me tremendously, because if we went at this on the basis of our overall income and went at it a little bit at a time, maintaining what we have and improving a little bit, we would be saving an awful lot of money by not paying all that extra interest. Mm-hmm. The time I was able to go to one of your meetings where you had sort of like a group and we all had different tables up at Silver Rock, I was very much impressed that every single group said that fiscal responsibility is one of the highest goals of the city, and we have to be complimented. You have to be complimented because we do have a less expensive city. Our sales tax is not as high as it is in Palm Springs and so forth. And I think all of us do appreciate that, but that means that we expect it to continue that way. So when people put down that they're satisfied with the existing maintenance, I'm satisfied with what I had when I came in 2010, 2011. I'm not satisfied with the way it is now.
Richard, our top priorities. The first one is public safety, second one is fiscal responsibility.
Very good, and I thank you, and I agree with that.
All right, thank you. Deborah.
I was going to pass because my comments have all been heard.
You got to come up here to pass.
Say a couple words. Brevity, really quick. Deborah McGarry, I live at 79335 Camino del Oro. Mr. Mayor, City Council, I thank you very much for the comments that you made this evening. Of course, I agree with pretty much what Marty was saying. Is the fact is that $35 is just not enough to be able to offset the cost. And granted, it wasn't necessarily a good decision to move forward with landscape and lighting and not making sure that you had enough funds to go ahead and move it forward. Again, that's something that's behind us. It's water under the bridge. Let's move forward. I like the idea of the possibility of forming a few people together and figure out how we can solve this. I think it's nice to see that, yes, 40% of the folks participated in a survey, and that's huge. I think it's also important to point out that, yeah, maybe 37%, which is a third of them, actually agree to probably some type of an increase, maybe not that large of one. The benefit is that you only have to get now to additional 25%, get over to 51% to actually see how you can get those folks to actually support something. I have to also agree with the last gentleman that when I first moved in, yes, my landscaping looked beautiful. I've lived in the city of La Quinta for 14 years, and I would love to see it improved. I spent a lot of time walking. I'm one of those ones that's out there walking, running around the neighborhood, and I would like to see it definitely improved. I know at one point we did approach myself and a couple of my neighbors, did speak to the city council at one point about what it would take to actually have it improved. And of course it was the proposal at that time, which was several years ago, is to form HOA, which is 100% approval, which we're probably not going to get, not necessarily in this environment based on the economy. So anyway, I do commend you for what you said. I'd like to see maybe if there's maybe more studies, or not necessarily a study, but put together some residents, have us help you come up with a solution, because then we take ownership of it as we start to move forward. But something needs to actually be done, because it's not right for the city to take a deficit, because we love the city. So I would actually support some type of assessment, but trying to figure out what's going to be best and fair for everybody involved. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Robert Wilkerson, yes.
Hi, I'm Robert Wilkinson, 44300 Camino Azul, and I also live in the Rancho Ocotillo area. Thanks for bringing this to attention, staff and council. It's an item that needs to be discussed, and appreciate that that's being brought to the forefront so we can have an opportunity to talk about it. In looking at the numbers, I've got basically one big topic in regarding the landscaping, and then three subtopics that I'd like to talk about. And one of those is in looking at the survey that we took, and then looking at the staff's numbers about the $300,000 overage that we spend annually. If you take the 1,666 homes and divide that by $300,000, that's $180.70. If you add our $36.50 onto that, that's $217.20 that's being spent. And if you go back to the survey, which I think is on page 13 of your packet, the first survey, item number 5, it says that $150 to $200 per year would fund the renovation of the landscaping enhancement, the level of the maintenance. And so I'm just wondering how that's not happening with the funds that are already being allocated, if you just do the math out of your own information. The other thing would be on the second page, you go back to item 7, and it basically says a similar thing, that on the second survey page, $200 to $250 per year would be involved in a more modest or partially renovated plan and enhancement level of the maintenance. And so if we're spending $300,000 extra right now, and there's $36.50, or in Rancho Ocotillo's case, $38.95 extra allocated, then there's $217 or $219.65 that's being spent on this already, but it's saying the level of service is going to be higher than what we're getting. And so I question the math a little bit. I also took the opportunity to meet with a couple of landscapers, and there's no scope of work, so we were winging it. But they're big, reliable landscapers that I've done business with in the past. And I asked them, okay, how much to clean this up to desert landscaping? And I got numbers anywhere from $3 a foot to $7 a foot, depending on whether it was prevailing wage or not. And that had a big influence in the cost. The prevailing wage part of it did. And we were kind of guessing. I mean, do we bulldoze it and start over and replace everything? And that ended up being at your $7 a foot type category. And or you leave some trees, you pick and choose areas that need some dressing up, and you end up at $3 a foot. You know, based on 1 million square feet, that's $3 million. If you take your highest number, $600 per resident per year, at 1,666 residents, that's $966,500. Just for the sake of math, let's say $1 million bucks. So you've got $3 million to $7 million, a $7 million problem here that can be fixed. And then, like Richard was talking about, I've heard about a bond that is proposed, and or a number that could be as high as 5% interest rate on the assessment of this $200 or $400 or $600 fee. Well, if you take the $600 number, you're turning a $25 million amount for bonds that would be collected at 5% interest. You're pushing $40 million. I think for the sake of frugality, if we come up with an assessment, we save the money, we pay it, we don't pay interest. We go for an amount or a look that makes sense, and at the end of 3 years at a high assessment or 6 years at the medium assessment, we've got all our landscaping paid for, and then it can be reduced or brought back down to a manageable number. I mean, we're talking about desertscape, which is less expensive to maintain to begin with. And so the maintenance cost should actually go down over the area compared to what we're spending now. The subtopics that I wanted to talk about, we've got some red lines that show no ownership. And I was wondering about on Fred Waring, where we've, the street's been tore apart, to realign that because the county did something goofy on the other side of the street with access to those houses and elevations and such. Who's paying for the replacement of all that? Is it the county, or are we chipping in on that?
No, the county.
Completely?
Yeah, it's the county, and CVAC's funding 75% of the cost of the project. It's a Measure A project.
So we're paying 25%?
We're not paying, no,
We're
the
not
county's
paying
picking up the 25%. CVAC's paying the 75%.
Oh, I see. It's kind of funny when we're talking about ownership. I just noticed that that's got a red line with no ownership, and then farther down in Cactus Flower, there's another red line, and yet it's getting tore apart. Who signed off on that as owner to do that?
Yeah, the actual, the Fred Waring Parkway is actually, it should have been a yellow and black line, because we had to accept that line, or that area, as part of the agreement with the county. So technically, we've accepted the improvements in the landscape right of way there.
Mm-hmm. So this doesn't
but
actually.
it's still in fee ownership to the original developer. So, but we had to accept the easement in order for the county. I know this is getting complicated. For the county to actually go in and do the improvements that we're talking about, the city had to accept the landscape easement back in September 2013, I believe.
Okay, so this should be a yellow and black dotted line here.
Just for that portion that's right in front of Rancho Ocotillo.
What about Cactus Flower then?
None of Cactus Flower, all of those, at least from a preliminary title report, we're showing the underlying fee owner to be the original developer, development entity.
And then, you know, what it might be, you said something about the no easement at the end of Adams Street by Desert Pride.
Right.
Right by the wash there.
Yes.
That might be hit under an IID rock somewhere, because there's a substation right there, if you're wondering who has the easement or owns it.
Well, from the preliminary title report, there was no easement recorded over that area. It's basically a perimeter wall with a landscaped, with a retaining wall and a landscaped area between the retaining wall and the perimeter wall that the city's been maintaining for some time, but there's no recorded easement there.
And I would like to discuss a couple missed opportunities. As long as we're near that substation, we just finished a bridge for $13 million right there. And it's a shame we couldn't have got a couple of $1,000 of landscaping to go around IID substation.
I think Mark Weber would agree with that. We talked about it at the time that the project was coming forward and how it could be accommodated, and IID refused.
Chain link fences are not in our ordinances. We're not supposed to have chain link fences, correct?
That's correct. They don't.
And so that might be some leverage to talk to them about getting a.
I think they're exempt from that
Robert,
requirement.
that's a utility company.
Yeah.
You can't negotiate with a utility company. You know that.
Yeah.
The water district makes their rules, IID makes their rules.
You kind of
School
can.
There's not a lot of rules, you know, back and forth with the
You
utilities.
kind of can. You kind of can negotiate with utility companies. But, and the signal that just went in over on Washington at Seville, I noticed there's a red line there, and that's part of the landscape issue, and we just put in a nice big traffic signal. Did we miss a beat maybe there on fixing some landscaping when however many hundreds of thousands of dollars of traffic
If
signal?
Mr. Ellison had volunteered to put in the landscaping when he was doing his improvements, one of which was the traffic signal, I'm sure the residents out there would have been happy to have that done.
Was he asked?
Robert, we're kind of getting off the
I know.
subject.
I'm talking about areas that are marked on this map, and it's frustrating when you do the math and people ask me, so I'm right at the front door of one of the subdivisions, that we're spending money, and then you figure it out, and well, there's $217 getting paid, and it says here $200 will cover it. How's that happen?
In all of the scenarios that were put together, there was still a general fund contribution to them. These payments that we talked about, or the assessments, would be in addition to what the general benefit was. And so it wasn't that the city was trying to make up the entire $300,000 on the assessment alone. There was still going to be a contribution, but this would be what we talked about in the workshops, was to raise that level so that improvements could be made.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Robert.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make one comment, because this bond thing now has come up a couple times. The city of La Quinta, not the redevelopment agency, but the city of La Quinta has never bonded for anything. And I find it highly, almost impossible that we would think about bonding for anything that had to do with lighting and landscaping. So you have to remember that when staff is working and putting things together to present to you, it is putting out the options that are out there. That doesn't mean that we never talked about a bond issue. So rest easy. There'll be no discussion about bonds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me throw it back out. That was all the request I had to speak, and that, so unless there's somebody else that would like to say something, I'll turn it back to the council. And Christie.
Okay, I just have a few comments, and I think one of the most important things to me that has come out from this discussion is that there's a talk about folks who live in North La Quinta and the Cove and South La Quinta. We are all one community. We are absolutely all one community. And when this presentation was made, the object of it was to get your feedback. So we certainly do have that, and that's good. I agree with Marty so much on a committee that we can put together, and it will create ownership. Mindful that not everyone is always going to agree, and it's going to be hard to move forward with that too, but again, that's part of what I believe really needs to be done. In my opinion, the areas that you see in red need to be owned by the city. It's just has to happen. Having them remain in limbo doesn't make me very comfortable. We really need, and this will come, I think, out of the committee too, we really need some consensus on what we can do in those areas. Do we want to do desert landscape? Do we want to put color in? How much irrigation do you want? A lot of that has to be replaced. So we need a consensus, and I feel like that, excuse me, we're coming towards that tonight. Again, this is a study session, and we're not making any decisions on anything. Doing it a little bit at a time, I think that's a great idea, but who's going to go first? So, well, a lot of people will be, I'm sure, you know, they want theirs done first. One of the other things that came out of this that I think is really important is that we tout being the gem of the desert. And those areas that we're talking about tonight are not very gemmy. Matter of fact, they're awful. Part of our economic development has to do with how our city looks. And it's not how South La Quinta looks or along Highway 111. It's the entire community. And that has to be rectified. So I would like to see us do a citywide increase, being mindful too that anytime we do something like that, it's a huge educational process for the residents, as well it should be, which is going to take time, but we're going to do it, and we have to get beyond the $35.60 a year, because it just, I mean, if you just, common sense tells you that's not going to work. And then I had a note here about no bonds, but you took care of that.
Thank you.
So overall, the more we can think about being one community with folks living here and there and everywhere, I just think that's really important. So as one community, we need to increase that $35 citywide. And I think that those folks that are here tonight are going to be folks who will help us educate other parts of the city, because look what the process you've been through. You know so much about our finances now. We've all gotten smarter, so we're looking forward to working with you, and I appreciate your being here tonight and your patience. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Final comments, Lee?
I think it's all been said. We need to do some more work and find out how we can handle this as one big city together to work out throughout the whole city. And the landscape and lighting district is something we'll be looking at come May, and at that point we'll decide what we can do there for the whole city combined, whether north or south or east or west, as one city.
Yeah. Okay. Terry?
I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening, and you've already heard we're going to do it again in May. I'm actually sorry that we're going to wait that long, but we'll all be back here again in May. Hopefully, are you going to have any more outreach with the public between now and May, or is it just going to come back to us?
We have nothing scheduled, but we are here to take direction if you
Okay, so
would like us to.
at the next study session, it'll be our responsibility, I'm assuming then, for us to bring a plan together and then have them go out and try to implement it, as much as getting the committees together in the various neighborhoods. And we are all one city. I've always thought of La Quinta as one city. I'm challenged when we have to make some kind of designation. So thank you again for coming tonight, and I enjoyed hearing from you, and I hope you learned a little bit about where we are and how we got here. So thank you.
Good. Linda?
So it sounds like the direction that we all vocalized was, A, we appreciate the feedback and the completion of the survey. We're directing staff to maybe evaluate the title ownership piece for that red striped land parcels and see what that would look like for us, potentially to assume. And then perhaps look at other ways that we could fund some of these improvements and what improvements really need to be made in the short run to bring them up to our standards, as we then continue to explore how the community will want to be involved in participating. But all in all, an L&L special assessment for these particular homeowners is clearly out of the question from a ballot standpoint because their survey response said X. So then it becomes a different citywide thing, which is outside of this particular subject matter while we're dealing with this particular deficit. But we're all in agreement. Sounds like, yes?
And you did include it, the possibility for a general tax.
Which is a citywide.
Citywide.
That could come up last week, last month, 2 years
Right.
ago, next year,
Right.
right. Either relevant to this or irrelevant to this for a means of generating revenue for the city for whatever
Absolutely.
purpose we determine is needed. Right, okay. Thank you.
And if I could, then the May study session, if we could do that at 7 o'clock to allow more folks to come that may be working and not off till 5 or 6, can join us at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, in conclusion, again, thank you very much. I think the dialogue is good, that we understand your feelings, and hopefully you get a feeling of how we feel about the issue in that. In the meantime, Tim, let me ask that our Public Works Department does whatever they can to mitigate the problems that are out there and to fix the issues that need to be addressed in that. I know within your budget, and it's difficult at this stage of the game, but I think it's important that we maintain the visual aesthetics of our community as best we possibly can in that. And again, thank you for all your input in that, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to the second item on our study session, and that's discuss draft fiscal year 2014-15 through fiscal year 2018-19 capital improvement program. Staff report.
Brian McKinney, Principal Engineer, will be giving this report.
Thank you, Tim. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, we're here to discuss the draft fiscal year 2014-15 through 2018-19 capital improvement program. I'd like to start by giving a brief status of the current year CIP. The 2013-2014 CIP identified almost $20 million in projects, although during the course of the year that was reduced by about $12 million.
Right.
Because we put the Highway 111 landscape projects back on the ad list, and we also put the Fritz Burns pool improvements back on hold, and we went with the parallel canal option out at Silver Rock, which reduced the cost considerably from the pipe option. All the other projects are either completed in design, under construction, or the contracts will be awarded by the end of the fiscal year. Brief summary of the completed projects. Some of the highlights are the Adams Street Bridge, which was completed just a couple months back and open to traffic. The roundabout at Eisenhower Drive and Sinaloa, which was also just recently completed and is operating well, we feel, out there at this point. We've also completed the Highway 111 and Washington Street improvements, which added triple left turn lanes on north and southbound Washington Street, and also added some dedicated right turn lanes out there to that intersection to help it function better. Some of the other projects we've completed include some ADA improvements at the library and the Civic Center Park, first phase of those improvements. And also some work out at Silver Rock, the irrigation relocation, which we did ahead of the canal relocation, which is going to take place later this year. Some of the ongoing construction projects include the second phase of some of the ADA improvements at the library and the Civic Center and La Quinta Park. Also, we have the pavement management plan project, which will rehabilitate 6 segments of road around the Civic Center area, actually on Tampico, Avenue 52, Park, Bermudas, and Washington Street. Other projects in progress include, as I mentioned earlier, the relocation of the Coachella Canal. That construction's slated to start 1st of May and wrap up by the end of September, at which point we will go in with our own project to rehabilitate the golf course. We also are just starting design of the Doom Palms Road bridge improvements, which we've gotten approval of funding from federal funding for that project also. It's approximately $17 million project. And we also have the Adams Street and Corporate Center Drive signal and street improvements. This will create a traffic signal at that intersection to make that stretch of road more safe, because we now have higher speeds due to the bridge being constructed. It will restrict some left turn movements along there to allow people to get onto Adams Street safely at a signalized intersection. Some of our other projects in progress include the sports lighting complex, to put some additional lighting out there at the sports complex on the fields there. Other ADA improvement projects that we've identified, and the Health and Wellness Center expansion, which is under design and it's slated to start construction here at the end of March, 1st of April. As I mentioned earlier, the Highway 111 landscape projects were returned to the ad list. And some projects are still on hold, including the Washington Street low-income apartments, Fritz Burns pool pool enhancement project also. Now we'll go into the 5-year CIP. We've identified a total of approximately $16.7 million in capital improvement projects over the next 5 years. And the ad project list contains projects totaling approximately $191.5 million. There's no funding identified for these projects. They're just sitting out there until such funding is identified. A listing of our 2014-2015 capital budget. We've got approximately $5.7 million in projects identified. It's 18 total projects, including 13 new projects. We also have some recurring projects, which include our payment management plan projects and our sidewalk and handicap ramp projects, which are an ongoing funding where we identify and address ADA issues on those. To go over the new projects, first one is the sports complex ADA improvements, which will address ADA deficiencies out at the sports complex. The Avenue 52 and Jefferson Street roundabout striping modifications, which will restrict the entrances into the roundabout and create a one-lane roundabout through striping at this point. We have the next two projects are projects that we've identified earlier as applying for CMAQ funding, grant funding, and it's the citywide traffic signal interconnect and the citywide advanced transportation management system. That's going to interconnect the traffic signals on all our major corridors where we're currently lacking some reaches right now. And then the transportation management system will give us the ability to control all those signals and ensure that they talk to each other through a central command system here at City Hall. The Fred Waring Drive reconstruction and between Washington and Adams is to rehabilitate the number 1 lane there, where we have some substandard asphalt, which we found out when we did the previous Fred Waring job, and we weren't able to address it at that time. The new roundabout at Westward Ho and Roadrunner and the new traffic signal at Jefferson and Dunbar are also projects that we're applying for CMAQ funding for. The roundabout will address safety issues which occurred during school drop-off and pickup times there at that intersection, where it backs up traffic all the way to Jefferson Street. This will help the traffic flow through there and hopefully eliminate that problem. And then the Jefferson-Dunbar traffic signal, we have some funding for that from the development. This would be to fund the other half through CMAQ and put in a traffic signal at that intersection, which we've had residents ask for previously on previous CIPs.
And Brian, on that one, that's the one that would have to share with Indio. They indicate, obviously they indicate their support, but is there also funding available for the developers that are going just north of that, in the Northgate property, Shondi, and all of the stuff that's happening there? Is there any link to the traffic that impact will have? That we can
Not
see?
that I know of. The developer adjacent to that is actually paid for half of the signal already. So the other half would be a combination of City of Indio and then the CMAQ grant funding, which would cover the entire cost of the signal.
That's an important one, yeah, for traffic safety.
And additionally, the roundabout there would also be a contribution from the City of Indio on that project. Additional projects include, the next two are at Horseshoe Drive Drainage and the Avenue Carranza Drainage, are two areas where we had issues during that last big storm in August. And actually the Horseshoe Drive, of course, was addressed earlier. This plan would go in there and put in some additional storm drain to keep the water off the street in the higher storm events and onto the golf course. We have the perimeter landscaping of the city-owned lots on Avenue 52. We're going to approve the aesthetic appeal of those lots by landscaping the perimeter of those lots over by the fire station.
On Avenue 52?
Yeah.
By the fire station?
By the fire station.
I got you.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
The next one is the City Hall turf conversion, which proposes to replace the turf around City Hall, and we could also extend that to some turf areas by the library and the senior center, and replace it with the desert landscaping, similar to what we did around the campus area. And then the last one is the Point Happy storm drain. It's actually to build an outlet structure for a storm drain that comes from the Point Happy area. The developer is paying for this improvement. It was supposed to have originally got in as part of the development, and it didn't, so now they're paying, and we'll do that as a CIP project. I would like to mention, though, that the drainage improvements, the landscapings, the turf conversion, those would be proposed to be funded by the general fund. For the 2015-2016 year, we have the YMCA ADA improvements to address the deficiencies there. The City Hall Council chamber improvements, which would improve some of the acoustic tile, the upholstery, the lighting in the City Council chamber itself. A new roundabout at Madison Street and Avenue 58, which is another project that we put in for CMAQ grant funding for. And then the next two, the Washington Street at Lake La Quinta Drive and Washington Street at Avenue 50 drainage improvements, are to address other drainage issues that we found during the big rain event also, where we had some localized flooding in those areas. And then the last one's the Miles Avenue and Washington Street intersection improvements, which would add an additional left turn lane on southbound Washington and a dedicated right turn lane on westbound Miles to help some traffic issues we've identified there. Over the next 3 years, mainly it's recurring projects, but there are a couple projects I want to touch upon here. It's during those 3 years, we would be banking some major A money for the Dune Palms Road street improvements, which is between the Whitewater River and Westward Ho. And the plan is to construct those improvements as the bridge construction is being completed. So we would widen out Dune Palms to its full width there between the river and Westward Ho. We also
I'm not really interested in how much you're going to do, but Jefferson and I-10, that's not in the city of La Quinta.
It's not, but we have been identified as contributing traffic to that particular
This is Indio's, or the county's actually lead on the project, but in the last CVAG traffic analysis, I think we're supposed to pay for 10.7% of the local match after all the grants are
strictly for
funded.
the interchange itself?
This is just for the interchange, so that is going to be our contribution. So we've got it scheduled in out years when we think the money will be due.
Same thing that we did with Washington Street.
This is the one that's significantly decreased.
We've been
Yes,
still paying
yes.
for it.
Yeah, we were over $5
Significantly.
million at one
Exactly.
point, and we're like 500,000 now.
This is a deal.
so.
And we're
So to
also
speak.
planning on using Measure A money to pay for our
Right.
share of that. And then the last one is the City Hall Customer Service Center. We're actually planning on asking for approximately $80,000 this upcoming fiscal year to look at the design for that. It's to create a customer service center here at City Hall, kind of a one-stop shop for development permits so that they don't have to go from department to department to department. It's to renovate the inside area to create an area where the developer can just come in one place and get all his work done there. And we're gonna take a look at it. We're asking for $1 million is what the architect estimated as the cost to do that, but as part of this $80,000, we're planning on looking to see if there's less costly alternatives to that also to try to make it work without, full-scale renovation. The last part of the CIP is the additional projects, and these are all the projects that we don't have any kind of funding identified. There are projects that we deem will need to eventually be constructed, but it may not be for quite a while. There's no funding now identified for it. And it includes all these bridge, street improvements, sound walls, parks, and other miscellaneous improvements. So in summary, with the council input, we're willing to make any revisions to the draft CIP that are needed, and to come back on April 15th with a public hearing and final approval of the capital improvement program. And with that, Tim and Nick and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to staff?
I'd like to make one clarification. In the current year, or the proposed next year, 2014-15 capital budget, we show $948,000 worth of projects that are listed as general fund being funded by the general fund, but we won't know if we'll have the capability to fund those by the general fund until we get into the operating budget and understand where that sits. Currently, the general fund is obligated to drop about $1,075,000 into the capital project fund on an annual basis. But above and beyond that, while we're bringing this forward to you at this point in time, until we get into the budget process and understand all the needs of the city, these may or may not be funded. So when we look at our capital project budget and we look beyond what we can get in terms of grants and Quimby funds, which are specifically designated for specific projects, going forward, we have to figure out, okay, we're no longer having redevelopment to pick up that slack. Do we do police services, capital projects, employee adjustments, et cetera, because it's all coming out of the same source going forward?
Good. Okay. Still questions of staff?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Lee.
So the first, Frank, in regard to your recent comment, that $1,075,000, I mean, the $1 million we have on the pavement management plan, I mean, we put that in that budget every year for quite a while. So I'm assuming that's part of that you're talking about, that $1,075,000 that we're going to put in there.
Correct.
Okay.
Because part of that is a requirement under our Measure A activities.
Right.
So now that we're part of that, we have to show a maintenance of effort, and this would be part of our maintenance of effort to then get what's under the Measure A grant.
Now, some of these other projects that we've got in the 2014, 2015, we have talked about some of these items in the past, and council has said we don't need to do these things. And one of the things I'm talking about is the roundabout on Westward Ho and Roadrunner.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought that item before council, and at that point we said we don't want to put a roundabout at that location.
I thought the discussion was to look at other methods which didn't actually pan out. Using an officer for doing the traffic control at that intersection was not a viable solution according to our police chief, and so we backed away from that. But We still think that a better traffic control device is necessary for the safety of the intersection and for the reasons that we talked about, it backing up traffic into Jefferson and causing other problems. And so this money, we thought that this would be a good applicant for a
the
grant.
traffic you're concerned on Westward Ho between Dune Palms and Jefferson, I mean, that's backed up with the light there at Dune Palms and Westward Ho, or Blackhawk Drive. That light right there at the high school, that's the one controlling that traffic per se. And so a roundabout at Roadrunner, it's still gonna be backed up. Whether you have a roundabout there or not, it's still backed up based on that stoplight there at Dune Palms and Westward Ho or Blackhawk. So I don't see how a roundabout there is going to alleviate that traffic. I mean, the stop sign, I don't see what that's gonna change.
If I could, Councilmember, if I could have Nazir explain the reasoning why a roundabout was found to be the best solution.
Mayor, members of the City Council, Nazir Lalani, the City Traffic Engineer. We've actually studied this issue very carefully, and it is actually the multi-way stop that controls the problem and not the signal. That issue was brought up very early on by India. They said, surely it's the signal. We said, no, come out, we'll take a video for you. We'll show you it's actually the multi-way stop that controls the problem. So the multi-way stop causes the backup to Jefferson and Westward Ho. So it's very much the multi-way stop issue.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna argue traffic with you, sir. You are much more qualified than I am from a traffic standpoint, so I'll take it your word.
No, but you've got a point, and I agree, Lee. Your traffic is first thing in the morning for going to school, and in the afternoon coming home from school. The rest of the time and on weekends, you don't have that much traffic on there. So to spend that kind of money for something for just an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, you got 20 minutes in the morning and maybe 20 minutes in the afternoon.
It's not a cheap venture.
Perhaps with CV Link, we'll have a safer route to school, and we won't have to worry about as many cars.
And I just don't think it's a safety issue either.
Right, I can appreciate using Measure A money versus general fund money for that. And, you know, if that's the grant, or you've got other grants involved, well, yeah, you've got a different grant involved for that.
That's primarily the funding source. We're leveraging our Measure A money in order to apply for this grant.
Okay.
And Indio's traffic engineer, who doesn't always agree with us, agrees that this is the best solution as well for this intersection.
So they're paying half of that?
They're paying for half of the matching money, yes, because it's half in their, they own the north half of
Indio's, well.
Westward Ho. Yes, they've committed to it.
I commend you on the negotiation there, but as the mayor said, I'm concerned about spending that much money for a problem that occurs that short a period of time on any one weekday. And the same goes, we were talking about the striping for the roundabout at Avenue 52 and Jefferson, that we didn't want to worry about restriping that roundabout. I mean, we've all used that roundabout many times, and given a safe and sane driver, it works just fine. It works great. I mean, given we're going to have a few drivers that aren't safe and sane.
It is usually in our top 5 of accidents in our annual accident report, and we think through some striping we can reduce the main problem is
just going down to one lane, 2 lanes down to 1 lane on the approach.
The approaches from the east and west direction on 52. For some reason, people don't slow down enough or realize that they're entering the roundabout until they're reaching too high of a speed. So what the proposal is on the striping plan is to reduce just the east and west approaches down to 1 lane, and then within the roundabout itself, making it clear that it's 1 lane only and 1 car in there at a time, because the other problem, less of a safety concern, is the side swiping that goes on within the roundabout itself. Nazir can tell you how many complaints he gets on a weekly basis from both of those issues, and it's a significant amount of staff time spent responding to them.
So how many accidents do we have there a year as an average at that roundabout?
No fatalities.
Mayor, members of council, over the last 10 years, which is the database we have, the complete database from 2003 to 2013, we've had 85 collisions, of which more than half are people running into the roundabout, most of them on the Avenue 52 approaches. I wish I could tell you psychologically why the wider Jefferson Street approach isn't the one.
Right.
It is the Avenue 52 approaches. The data very clearly shows that. So I recommended to the Director of Public Works
85.
that we do only Avenue 52 to address the specific problem of people running into the roundabout. And we've added more signs, we've done a lot of things, and yet people continue to run into the roundabout.
They must happen at 3 o'clock in the morning because I don't see them, and I live there and I go through that thing
through it all the
6,
time.
8 times a day.
Are they more eastbound or westbound?
You might as well have a seat right up front this year.
I should, definitely. It is actually both eastbound and westbound. I don't have my printout here because I wasn't expecting those detailed
Sometimes you're
conditions.
going east, sometimes you're going west.
Residents come and go to
Yeah,
But you could say that, maybe, yes.
Well, it's going to be
Okay.
interesting to see the statistical data once you put this in and see what transpires, whether it's going to correct it or make it worse. I personally kind of think it's going to make it worse because people will be funneling from 3 lanes down to 1.
Well, you're gonna have the right lane, the right turn right there at the roundabout that you've already got. And
Yeah,
that's
but
right for
people
that.
are in
So
that
the other 2
lane and they're
lanes-
trying to merge over into the middle and the inside lane.
Yeah,
All right.
we're not
So,
changing
it'll
any
be
of the-
interesting.
any physical geometrics. We're doing it all with striping and raised pavement dots, because if this is not the right solution, we will be able to take it out at much less cost, if that proves to be the case.
It's like the trial pilot of.
Yes.
And, all right, my question earlier I had, the Jefferson Street in Dunbar, that light is being paid 50% by the developer on the La Quinta side. So,
That is our number one CMAC priority project. We are.
That's a safety issue.
It is.
Those people making that left-hand turn
it
coming
is.
out of that complex, it's dangerous, and people
Right.
are going too damn fast
yeah,
at that point.
Indio was very supportive of that project
Yeah.
for their folks coming out of Heritage Palms.
So why do we still have it listed at 430? Because that's the cost per signal, right?
That's currently what our estimated total project cost is for a traffic signal, including design,
so,
all
but,
the
but
administration.
good
and so
point. I
forth.
mean, we're paying 50% of that 430,000.
And
Well,
India's paying 50.
No.
We're not paying the entire amount.
The
and
developer.
Nick can he
Mr.
put our
Nickerson, why
CMAC
don't you enlighten
request
us in this
together,
area,
so I'll let
please?
him answer that question.
Every signal is 430.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Tim, staff. Basically, what's being proposed here is that we submit that 430, 88.53% of that cost to CVAG and ask for a CMAQ grant.
Okay.
The 11.47% that's left, we've got commitment from Indio to pay half of that. And so all of a sudden now your cost is real tiny. Okay, and so we will not spend all that development set-aside money if we're successful in getting the CMAQ money and Indio pays their share, then we'll have some of that money left.
Okay, thank you. One last item, well, I have here for the 2014-2015. The City Hall turf conversion of $477,000 out of the general fund. I can certainly appreciate being water efficient, but to spend $477,000 is a bit much. And I don't know whose idea. Who wants to-
That was
Who wants
my
to raise their hand
idea.
first?
I will take ownership of that one. And that's the cost of, I'd have to defer to the gentleman there in terms of the total area. But if we're gonna be preaching water conservation, then how can we be dumping water on a bunch of turf? Now, I agree that's a fair sizable cost there, and so I defer to them because it was both around City Hall and then some other areas.
Yeah, if we just wanted to limit it to the immediate City Hall area, it would be just over half of that 477. The 477 also included a big lot over there by the senior center and some areas by the library. If we just stuck to the City Hall itself, it would, like I said, it would be just over half that amount.
But we could also split that up into different periods to reduce our general fund costs in any one year.
That's correct.
Yes.
And again, it's a situation that, if the sky was the limit, we could fund all of that potentially. But my gut's telling me we're not going to have
that
No,
night.
Yeah, I'd agree,
Or-
especially with the big question mark on CalPERS, what that gonna be in the future with the changes. I would agree with moving that to an ad project. Regarding your comment regarding Highway 111 and the landscape enhancements on Highway 111 and the auto display pads, can you tell me what you're talking about there? It's on my page 411, but on the,
Wasn't that what we were talking about earlier?
well, the auto display pads.
Where they're displaying their automobiles in that 50-foot landscape setback.
Why are we paying for that at all?
Well, it was part of a project that we looked at some time ago. We had the Highway 111 design guidelines that we brought to the council. I don't remember the year. Les probably does better than I do. The monument, but it included some upgrades, an upgraded or updated design of the entry monuments. We were going to eliminate the fountains for one thing, and just make them look a little bit more current. And then also part of the project was going to be to redo the frontage on Auto Center, or the Highway 111 frontage there, and it included auto display pads that the auto dealerships thought would be helpful rather than parking on the turf and sometimes even the sidewalk that they do right now.
And they're moving them day to day after. So, all right, so we put that on an ad to put back into the future. And then the comment regarding the transportation development impact fee funding is not available at this time to reimburse the developers for eligible improvements. What is our obligation to developers for reimbursement? Do we have a number on that?
I think there was a dollar amount in the $6 million range.
3.5, right at the top.
Okay, the cost of, is that the number?
It's approximately 3.5 million.
Okay, it's less than that.
Are we behind in our commitment in that regard?
Well, when we do the reimbursement agreements with the developers, we do not, on purpose, we have not defined a time frame for reimbursing them. They are given the same opportunity as others for when the capital improvement program is updated to, plead their case basically, and that's the system that we currently have.
I mean, did we make commitments there that we are not fulfilling?
Well, we plan to fulfill them when funds are available, but they are not available at this time.
Wish we could tell that to the state of California.
I think we've tried.
They don't listen.
They didn't.
It's tomorrow. You do that tomorrow.
Yeah. And then on the 2015-2016 list, again, you've got another roundabout regarding Madison Street and Avenue 58. Why are we looking at a roundabout at that interchange, or that four-way stop sign?
Well, it is a four-way stop now, and I'd ask Nazir to
come on
back up and explain that. This one is another CMAQ request. We are leveraging, again, our Measure A money in anticipation of needing a better traffic control device eventually there.
Eventually.
Eventually.
I mean, that's four-way stop right now at Avenue 58, and Madison does not get too much traffic.
Well, if you lived in Trilogy, you might think differently.
Well, I've been down there throughout, you tell me.
Well, as part of the general plan update, there were a number of intersections that were studied, and this was included, and the decision was made that we would attempt at every location we could to put in a roundabout rather than a traffic signal. So this is one of the first ones that meets the intent of the general plan to go forward with doing roundabouts rather than signals, where signals are getting close to being warranted. And so this is the first one, and it fits the CMAQ grant application process very well. So the decision was made to go forward with that one.
And my concern is, though we may have funding to build one, it's still going to come down to the general fund at the end of the day to either maintain it or change it at some point in time, as we may or may not need to. I mean, I know at one point you guys wanted to put a stoplight at Avenue 54 and Jefferson in front of PJ West. And it really didn't warrant it. I mean, maybe your numbers said something different than our everyday use. So I am concerned about putting a roundabout way down there at Avenue 58. And true, know, folks at Trilogy may say something different. I don't know. But I certainly wouldn't want to put something there if we don't have to, because later when we do need to maintain it or change it or restripe it because someone can't read a sign, that's coming out of the general fund. So I don't want to create obligations if we don't have to for the future general fund.
Yeah, well, two points there. We've learned a lot about roundabout designs since the Jefferson 52 was done, and so we are being very, very cautious in the way the designs are done now with the FHWA guidance, Federal Highway Administration guidance, so that we don't end up with having to redesign roundabouts. So that's point number one. So we will follow the guidelines from the federal government very carefully. And secondly, the designs are being done in a way so that there is very little maintenance involved compared to the traffic signals, which are running us around $10,000 a year per signal. We're looking at roundabouts at a much less cost. So that's the reason for also going towards roundabouts.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know that the numbers are going to warrant a traffic signal any time in the next 2 years. But we'll look at that again, you know, in next year's.
But I think your roundabout, in the future, probably down the road, when Jefferson gets extended and the development of Andalusia, and that, when it develops, it isn't something that's going to happen in the next 2 years. No,
it's not.
But somewhere down the road, probably it would warrant a roundabout in there.
I just don't think it does now.
But not now. No.
All right, that is it for my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Terry?
What triggers the traffic signal on Washington, and I believe where the restaurant is, that is Lake La Quinta Drive, isn't it? What triggers that traffic signal?
That's a condition of development for, keep calling it the old Lang luxury property.
Right, and isn't that in the process of being run through the mill, if you will?
It is part of their off-site improvements to construct a traffic signal there.
Okay, so it looks like that may happen within the next 18 months or so.
They're moving very quickly on that
Okay, so
project,
sooner than
as I
that,
understand
yeah.
it.
Okay, and then I'd just like to comment a little bit on these roundabouts. The roundabout at Westward Ho and Roadrunner, it's a three-way.
It's four-way stop actually right now.
Four-way stop?
Uh-huh.
The entrance into that.
Sure.
Yeah, we stop
The development.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
gate, it's the south gate for the Indian Springs development.
Okay, all right, I was thinking it was a three-way intersection out there that was causing some problems.
I'm not sure there's a problem.
Let me catch up with where I'm at here, because we had some interesting items that we just talked about. Oh, the roundabout at Jefferson and 52, as far as I can remember that conversation, it was left with coming back with whatever you decided, but just so it was clearly signed that it was either 2 lanes or 1 lane.
Right.
Whatever it was, just to make sure it was signed from way ahead of time, so people would know, and they wouldn't be guessing, is this a 2-lane one or a 1-lane? So I'm perfectly satisfied that this has come back to you at this point. The City Hall turf conversion, before we really get into that discussion too deeply, I'd like to maybe suggest that as we go through the process of the potential citywide tax for lighting and landscaping, and we know that parks is over $1 million underwater, that we look at some of these things. I think we're going to disappoint an awful lot of people in this community if we mess around with that Civic Center campus too much, Mr. Spivacek.
Visioning on this is not touching the grass that goes from the berm back into the park, but along the perimeter areas there where we have.
But I thought we just did all the perimeter areas two or 3 years ago.
Not to the degree that we'd be looking at here, because if you go down Washington, we have turf along there. If you go down Cali Tampico, we have turf along there. If you go down La Fonda, we have turf along there.
Yeah, we do, but we just spent several $100,000 to get it to where it is, half turf and half
And
not turf.
it's my understanding that the staff recommendation was to do all desertscape, and then it was moved back to the turf area. And so I'm sitting up here hearing people talk about we need to discipline people with water usage.
Right.
And our own house is using a lot of water in the public areas. I question. That's why we put this forward, is to have this discussion.
I'm glad you brought it forward. I'd like to have that discussion before we start taking grass out of Civic Center. And as far as the new roundabout at Madison Street and Avenue 58, I would agree that we need to put that in when it's needed. But I think if we designate that as a site for it, then we have set aside the land that's going to be necessary for it too.
Great idea.
So, I mean, I think it is important that we get out there and we figure out where we want these things so that we know and it doesn't get ahead of us.
Yeah, 2 of those corners are vacant. There's nothing there.
Right.
The other 2 are developed.
Yeah.
Buying land 10 years from now or whatever.
Right, so this would be the time to have that planning process and have it designated. But as far as having it on here for the following year, it doesn't mean it's
not-
gonna happen.
It's not ready.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I say we definitely just pull the roundabout at Westward Ho and Roadrunner and move the City Hall turf to an ad project to be discussed at a later time. Saves us some money. And I guess I don't know if we can put a footnote on that 430,000 if we're paying a fraction. It really means we don't have to budget 430,000.
Right.
Because we're not actually paying for 430,000.
Yeah, there should be an asterisk with a little,
With our
description
share.
at the bottom.
Otherwise, we should put, how much the interchange costs with an asterisk that says it's
Yeah.
only 300 and some odd for our portion. It's fine. We need all these things done. And is it Patty? Definitely priority is the Horseshoe Drive drainage.
Yeah.
So it's on there to be done. Good job. Build the plan.
Okay. Christie, you? No, I didn't either. My conversation with Frank this morning resolved all of mine, so I didn't have a problem in that. I do have a couple of requests to speak. Kay?
Kay Wolf, 77227 Cayenne Sonata. And what caught my attention was looking a little bit beyond the next fiscal year. I remember a month or more ago when we had the discussion about the sales agreement of the lots between Old Town and the library. We had the discussion about the future location for the Arts Foundation and/or its parking. And I looked in here for something that might say that within the next 5 years or so that there might be some area. I know Silver Rock had been mentioned as possibly a new park that could be used for festival grounds with parking included there, or maybe you've got some other ideas, but I know the foundation people are thinking they're not going to be able to do very well at at their current location. So I'm sure that you're going to be planning with them. I just wanted to bring that up. Also, on your ad list was $7.5 million for a future village area parking structure, AD number 60. And I know that Wells Marvin mentioned the same evening we had that discussion about parking for Old Town. He said, well, the city is going to have to build a parking structure. And I guess if you're looking for funding for that, maybe Wells will chip in. And
I agree
the
wholeheartedly.
last thing, and the nearest and dearest to my heart, is AD number 25, which says a signal at Eisenhower and Montezuma. I'm hoping that that will morph into another
roundabout.
wonderful roundabout. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. Sandy Rogers?
Do I need to give my address again?
Sure.
79880 Horseshoe Road, La Quinta, California. And we are south, Patty and I, of this roundabout you're talking about on Roadrunner and Westward Ho. And I walk my dogs every day, now that I live here, down to the park at school time. And I haven't really seen that much of a problem. There's not much traffic after the school, like you said, on both points. But what I saw that was wrong was a lot of the parents are letting their kids out of the car in the traffic. And there was an accident, I don't know if you're aware of it, a couple of years ago. And the police didn't know who was in charge, whether it was Indio, it happened over here, but the boy crossing over La Quinta on the line. And he broke his collarbone. His mother let him out of the car, he cut it front. The girl coming this way didn't see him because of the sun in her eyes. And I was able to stop her. I went out and directed traffic with the dogs and everything. And I think there should be some kind of a thing that you can, I was out directing traffic, and the school people came over in their little golf carts. And I said, they're security people in their bikes. I said, don't you want to direct traffic? They said, oh, that's not our job.
Yeah, naturally.
You know. And then the principal came out and got mad at me because I was directing traffic, but somebody had to because there was only one police officer at that time, you know, and it was a big problem. But I just wish that there was some way, I didn't come up for this, but I wish there was some way there was a place for them to drop the kids off better, you know what I mean? They drop them in the park, a lot of times they ditch school. I mean, that's honest, but it's just too bad. But I think a roundabout, I've traveled a lot, as I told you. I think roundabouts are dangerous. I don't care for them. I think people get confused, especially if they're young kids drinking and driving, and older people. And my first thought was when you were going to do one in Madison in 58, and I think now that I don't know the valley that well, but 58's further than I thought because of that Coachella Fest. You don't want all those kids, as much as they drink and go crazy, going about a roundabout, you know what I mean? You talk about accidents. I don't know why. Like Mexico City's got them, and different parts of the world have them too. Tijuana even put one in, and it's scary. You go around them really fast, you know? So I don't know why everybody thinks roundabouts are so great. I mean, can you tell me?
I don't know. They do them all over Europe, and they do the East Coast, and everybody seems to enjoy them. The vast majority of people that live out where I live and that go through the 52
Oh, I know, I go through that a
Jefferson,
lot.
and they love it because they don't have to stop and wait for a signal to turn.
To go,
you got a
yeah.
green or red and that, and they seem to flow through it very well. And I really question the number of accidents. Like I say, in my, how many years that thing's been in there, I've only seen one accident, and that was just after it opened, and it was a big gravel truck that didn't understand that there was a roundabout there and went right over the curb, and a palm tree was laying on its hood. And that's the only accident that I have ever seen out there.
Well, no, I've never had a problem with that one. Those are easy compared to some of the ones in some of the cities, you know, where they drive crazy.
The next time you're out and about, come on over to Eisenhower and drive up Eisenhower South. And because we just opened a new one there, and it's
Oh, you
a
did?
very small, it's a very small one. And
Well, it's probably because there's not a
see what
lot
you
of
think of
traffic,
it.
so it'd be good. I just don't know, and Patty and I were just talking how much room there'd be for one right in the corner of
Takes a lot of room.
Westward Ho
Well,
and
that's,
Roadrunner. And they're putting that new development in, you know, right there in that next street down.
yeah.
Can't think of the name of it. They're finally doing that. Right
So
on.
what
Believe
we've-
it or not, we have 5 roundabouts in the city of La Quinta.
We do?
So
Get
what we've
around one.
learned is it produces a continuous flow of traffic, yet it's a calming device for speed. It's less wear and tear on the road conditions for the pavement management piece. It reduces the emissions because the engines are not stopping and starting
Oh, that's good
and
to know.
revving up. And aesthetically, it's more pleasing than having a traffic signal in the neighborhoods.
Oh, much better than traffic signal. It's much better.
Thank you.
That's very good. No, it's very good. Thank
I
you.
asked the same questions you did.
No, I'm thank you very much, because it's better than a signal. I don't care for a signal.
Yeah.
But,
Truck signal in, you have to put street lights up.
I know you do, because my girlfriend, you know where I live, she lives over on Palm Desert Country Club, and she sent me the back way down, you know, whatever street I went down. I guess I went down Miles, anyway, or Adams, and I had to go over and catch Fred Waring and go around and find her house, and I was so freaking lost because I didn't know my way around at all. I just knew 111. And it was so dark. I said, don't they have any lights in this town? And she said, no, there's ordinances for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Well, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, Dan. All right, unless there's anything else,
Are you guys have questions or
I
confusion?
think we're clear on what was the outcome? Are we going to apply or not apply for the roundabout at Westward Ho and Roadrunner? Is that?
I don't think so.
I don't.
So we're removing that project from the list, and we're
Yeah, I
not going
thought
to
we
file
resolved
the
that.
CMAQ request. Okay.
No, I thought, once we realized that there was a significant grant involved there, and there is a problem. There is a problem there. And it's not gonna go away, because the high school isn't gonna go away.
It doesn't cost us anything.
Well, it will at some point in time. We need to do something to it. You know, and we brought this before the school board, and we asked them, you know, you have a resource officer, can they be there to handle traffic? And they told us that the morning hours is the most important time for a resource officer to be around because of the challenges of folks, of non-students coming on campus. So they wouldn't do that. And whether our La Quinta Police Department could have someone there for 20 minutes in the morning and potentially 20 minutes in the afternoon is another question, but I'm sure that would be an additional increase to our general fund in costs. So I don't see the need for it at this point in time. Yes, sir.
Could I make a suggestion that we see if we get the CMAQ grant? Because if we do, then our cost is $27,000 for the project. If we don't, then you know, we can't build it
We'll take that
anyway.
27 out of the landscape budget for $477,000.
Well, granted, I sure hope we're gonna continue to function as a city.
I do too. But again, living within our means, these are, but given, if we can get a grant, I mean, if we get a grant and somebody else pays for the whole thing and it relieves the traffic per Nazir.
Okay, so we'll leave that in as far as a request for now.
We're not budgeting a dime.
But we won't budget it until we find out the outcome of the grant application. Is that the consensus?
Yes.
And it'll definitely come back.
Fair enough.
Many times.
And then the other change, I think, for 14-15 is the City Hall turf conversion. You want that as an ad project, or you want that broken up over several fiscal years?
Ad means it stays in the list, but it's completely unbudgeted, right?
That's correct.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Okay, so that one, that will come off the list.
All right.
And I think that was the only changes that I had down from what we've proposed. So we'll make those changes and bring them back with the public hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to reports and informational items. Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one to report on, and that's a special meeting we held for the CVAG Conservation Commission. And it was specifically to amend the multi-species habitat plan to add Desert Hot Springs and Mission Springs Water District, which the Conservation Commission approved to go forward to the Executive Committee.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I meet on Friday with CVB, and we don't have E&E this month, so thank you.
Okay, Christine?
Yes, a very interesting animal campus meeting recently. One woman who wanted to speak under public comment mentioned that she had a friend who was dying who wanted to contribute $500,000 to the animal campus, and but that she was in hospice. And so I said, well, we can make this an urgency. It wasn't on the agenda.
For $500,000, I guess so.
So that's what we did. And we'll see how that works out. If it happens, it would be just fabulous, but anyway, we'll see.
Well, sad and fabulous.
Well, of course,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is sad.
To its soil.
Animal Samaritans, since they've had their place, their new place has adopted out 5,000 pets, which is great. And the at the Date Festival, there were 197 dogs adopted, which is pretty incredible. There are so many different agencies right now that are doing spay and neuter. And one is called the Lucy Pet Foundation, and they have a truck or a bus or whatever you want to call it that goes into different communities, and they set the dates and everything for it. And I had said to Frank that they're really focusing in Mecca and Thermal and Indio, and I'd like to have them in La Quinta one day if we could. Maybe we could do a link to our website or whatever. They do a fabulous job. They really do. That's about it, and I will keep you updated on this money, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Okay, Terry.
No, I've had a very quiet March, thank you.
Good. Lee?
I have no reports.
And I have no reports. We haven't had a meeting. We'll be having them coming up. Okay. We'll move on to department reports. City Manager.
Just have one thing to add, that I received an email this afternoon, and as you know, we're going to have discussions about Silver Rock, and they will have the investor there too, John McClure. So tomorrow when we get together, it'll be the full complement.
We'll see what happens tomorrow, won't we? Okay. City Attorney.
I have no report.
City Clerk.
No additional report.
Okay. Well, department managers, nothing? Okay. Police department, no? Sitting back there, okay. With that, we'll move on to mayor and council members' items. I just have the one, just to make the comment. Most of us attended the Senior Inspiration Awards the other day. It was done very nicely. I thought a lot of people there, and I think it was handled very nicely in that. So thank you for attending with me.
I like the format better this year. They didn't just ask one question.
Yeah.
Of the award recipient.
Yeah.
Go on and on.
They didn't go back and forth. Brooke did all the introductions, and it moved a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah.
That was good.
It's nice that they know who I am, though.
Yes. Mr. Mayor.
That happens. She came up and gave me a big hug. And I apologize. She said, I know it just went over my head.
She called Don Mayor Rudolph.
Mr. Mayor, I have just one thing. I had the
Okay.
opportunity to attend the city's 6th annual police bicycle rodeo at the La Quinta Park, and Officer Moore was there, and Lieutenant Walton had an opportunity to kind of walk me around, and this is where we do a bicycle obstacle course for kids. It's children's safety. We give them helmets. We check their bikes for tire pressure, chains, things like that. The K-9 did a demonstration. Fire truck was there, motorcycles. It was really, plus some fun zone stuff, but it was a great, our resource officers were out there as well as our volunteer police. And it was a great community service, and obviously a good investment on our part, because we're helping fund that, and
You bet.
learned a lot, and just another good way for La Quinta to be out there and protecting our little ones.
Good. Anyone else?
Yes, one item, I attended the Sunday through the Arts Festival. I think they did an outstanding job of the Arts Festival this year. The amount of artists and the different types of artists were there. I think they did a fantastic job. How they had set it up with food vendors and everything else, it was superb. And from what I understand, sales had never been higher. The artists had a fantastic time selling, and so it worked out really well. And I had sent an email to Christy. I think they did an outstanding job to, again, maintain that #1 position in the
Right.
country. So hats off to the Arts Foundation.
And it's just a great compliment with the tennis tournament going on,
Right.
that people are going back and forth, that cross-marketing
So busy.
opportunity.
Good. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, second.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. At this time, I'll call to order the regular meeting of the successor agency to the La Quinta Redevelopment Agency for Tuesday, March 18, 2014. Let it be known that all agency members are present. We'll move on to public comment. No public comment. We'll move on to approval of minutes of March 4.
So moved, second.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Move on to the consent calendar.
Move the consent calendar. Second.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to department reports. Frank?
We met once already. We're going to meet again tomorrow. Basically, the oversight board is still working together, and everybody seems to be in agreement that we need to do things to keep moving the agenda so we can shut things down.
Very good.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to business session. We have one item this evening, and that's adopt a resolution approving issuance and sale of subordinate tax allocation refunding bonds. We've already been through this.
Yes, I don't know that we need a second for it. I'll move to approve the business item.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Please vote.
Do we have to say
Motion
resolution
passes
number?
unanimously.
004?
With that, I'll ask for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Then moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. With that, I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Financing Authority for Tuesday, March 18, 2014. Let it be known that all authority members are present. Public comment? Seeing none, move on to confirmation agenda. Are there any changes by staff? No. By agency members?
No.
Authority members, excuse me. No? Okay. Move on to approval of minutes of February 18th, 2014.
So moved. Second.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Move on to the consent calendar.
Moved. Consent. Second.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Move on to the business session. We have one this evening, and that's a resolution approving issuance and sale of subordinate tax allocation refunding bonds. And that, we've been through this, so I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of resolution FA 2014-001.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved and second, please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Housing Authority for March 18th, 2014. We'll note for the record that all members are present, and there is now at this time a verbal announcement.
Board members of the La Quinta Housing Authority are entitled to receive a $50 stipend as set by Section 34274 of the Health and Safety Code, not to exceed 4 meetings per month, to be paid to members in attendance at every convened Housing Authority meeting.
Thank you. Next item is confirmation of agenda. Does anyone have any changes? Seeing none, approval of minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Consent calendar.
Move consent calendar.
Second.
That a motion and a second. Please vote. That also is a unanimous vote. Thank you for passage.
Move adjournment.
Thank you. Please vote. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Passed unanimously.